And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Wednesday, March 12th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by Chris Spags. He's right here underneath. We're brought to you by Stokastic. Sign up at stokastic.com. You can get a free month. If you sign up through one of our affiliates, get the sims you're looking for, projections, ownership, boom bust tool, all of the sims, Discord, and more. Come on in. Or maybe that's not what you're looking for. Maybe you already have it. You can sign up and get a month at OddsShopper.com, get the Portfolio EV tool. That's streaming right now on playback if you want to check out the best bets that are available for tonight's slate. And they are constantly updating through the show. So they could pop up over and over again. You could grab yourself 10, 15 bets throughout the entire show and build out a little bit more of your card. But we've got a 7-game slate tonight on DraftKings, with all 7 games locking within a half hour of each other. 2 more games on the FanDuel slate, 10 o'clock late night hammer. Let's have some fun. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. Spags, what's up?
Excited to be here. It's a fun slate. Josh off tomorrow from the show. I'm also off tomorrow from the show because got a little family trip. So this is kind of a nice little swan song slate where we have some pretty obvious value. $5 DK slate. I always like getting a few extra entries in for those. So I think it all fits pretty well. And I'm curious to talk about Toronto, guys, because it is an interesting mix of a tanking team and a team that could easily make the play in if they tried even this much.
There's a lot of weird going on today's slate. Depending on which team we end up looking at, it's either these aggressive tank mode guys that you want no part of. There's the teams that are just real, but like missing someone and uninteresting. You got that Clippers Miami game that's so slow and low total, but unfortunately is still like a little interesting on the Clippers side. Everything's got like its own unique little thing to talk about. This is going to take us a bit. I think there's a lot to break down.
James Harden in Miami too. So that's gonna that alone is something.
Oh, boy. I can't remember. In that strip club analysis, was he better in Miami or worse in Miami?
I think he was worse anywhere that there was a high predilection of strip clubs, I think. So, like, when there was a concentration of them, he did, and they were well-reviewed. I think he did worse, was the finding.
Interesting. Okay, so, like, when he plays the Jazz, he's going to go off.
Yeah, because, like, he can't go out and have a good time because it's, you know, if he goes out, it's like, it's crappy. He comes back home. He's done.
I assume Utah has, like, a state curfew, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, probably, especially for people who look like James Harden.
Very true. They really don't like people with beards.
It's true. It's exactly.
You want to talk some basketball?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Let's go. Charlotte Hornets, 8.5-point dogs in Atlanta, 241 total. Second highest total on today's slate. The Hornets are more interesting than I was expecting them to be. We have 40% ownership coming into your boy, Miles Bridges, at 8,600. We've got 25% ownership coming into LaMelo Ball right now at 9,600. I've got both of those guys in our boom bust tool ranked in the top 10 for today. Nurkic is questionable. Our boy Damian Bowe is with the G League team. By any chance, have you seen that if Malachi Flynn has signed another 10-day contract?
No, I heard you talk about it, and I'm with you that I assume he's not available because if you're on 10 days, but there should be a better reporting mechanism for it because injury report doesn't do it. There isn't anywhere else that keeps up to date with it. The injury report's usually your thing, so it's weird.
Yeah. Per Yardbarker 5 hours ago, Hornets opt not to re-sign Malachi Flynn after a 10-day deal. So he's not around. Damian Bowe's with the G League team today. I don't think any of those things really matter. There's not much ownership coming into the rest of these dudes. Talk to me about Miles Bridges, man.
I feel like Miles Bridges for me is like I was at the punk rock band before they got big and now he's blown up and now he's going to be incredibly highly owned and probably disappoint everybody. But quietly, he's just been great since Brandon Miller went out. Like Brandon Miller benefited a lot from having LaMelo Ball out there. Those two had a good synergy. The assist rate for LaMelo was substantially higher as well, about 7 to 10% percentage points higher, basically, depending upon the different group of Hornets you have with all the various injured guys. But for LaMelo, like he looks okay with Brandon Miller being out, the other various Hornets not available. Bridges takes a leap up, puts up 30% usage, 18% assist rate, rebounds a little bit more as well. So he becomes a better player. And on top of that, he's playing now 35 plus minutes a game. So I think those two things combined make it look good, along with the fact you are playing Atlanta, who we do know plays fast, plays loose, and gives Charlotte today one of the better implied totals they've had this year with 116.5 implied for them before the show. So I think Bridges is a strong play. Are you on the Bridges train? Because like that's a big tiebreaker for me because this is a lot of ownership for Bridges.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't get at least some of him today. The volumes there. There aren't many talented offensive players on the rest of this team outside of him and LaMelo. He's been playing massive minutes. The matchup's great. Like everything is on in his favor. Pace up spot, great total. Not a great Atlanta team. I mean, they've been a lot better. They're much deeper than they were before, but still a little lacking in like top shelf talent. I get it. I don't like it. I don't want it, but I totally understand where the ownership's coming in. 45% optimal in the boom bust tool, 34% chance of 53 fantasy points. I bet I'm going to assume that I have every bit of that 40% ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at 66. That feels a little bit high to me, but I did also knock Scotty Barnes' projection down a little bit, which I'm not sure entirely I'm going to handle that. Spoiler alert. But I think Bridges is definitely worth the chalk ownership. I think he's worth being the field on. It's just how much he's worth. I feel like I feel like I'm going crazy, Josh. I've been on an island for Miles Bridges for so long, and now everybody's here with me.
Shout out to S&P here for dropping this in. Hornets are going to be signing Marcus Garrett to a 10-day contract to replace the 10-day deal of Malachi Flynn. Shout out Rod Boone. LaMelo? Because I think he looks pretty damn good here as well at 9,600, but I'm definitely a little concerned with him. I rarely trust him. I love him. Like, I think I want to get him to a real team at some point in time, but what do you want to do with him today?
I think he looks okay here, and I do think he's sort of your most live pivot from Bridges, where if LaMelo has an outlier day scoring, Bridges bricks his shots, which he certainly can do in certain situations. LaMelo might have a good shot to go off against an Atlanta team that is, pace up spot, not good defense, all the things we're looking for to attack. So 25% for LaMelo feels right. I think I'm not there, though, unfortunately. I'm only getting about 16% of my top 150. Getting a little bit more on Mark Williams at 11% than the field. So look, I want to get exposure to all these guys because it's a good spot versus Atlanta, and it's kind of a concentrated Hornets roster now with a lot of production coming down to these three guys. So I think getting 25% LaMelo feels about right. 40% Bridges feels about right. To be 10 to 15% Mark Williams feels about right. I think you want to be here for those guys, and probably not the secondary pieces quite as much.
Yeah, I think all three of those guys are very much in play. I mean, Bridges is extra special cash game play. LaMelo is borderline cash game play. Mark Williams just looks like a good GPP option. Not pulling as much ownership as I was expecting based on this morning. What about the rest of these guys? Can you get like any interest in backup center Yusuf Nurkic? Because that scares the hell out of me. And after that, it's like praying that a not good Daquan Jeffries gets a ton of time.
I mean, look, I think Nurkic has been fantastic on Charlotte. I do think as a value play at 3,700, you could maybe squint your eyes and see him as a pivot point to a Mason Plumlee, who's going to be an important player on later on in terms of the value on the slate. But the mid is just not being there. I don't have a lot of faith in it. And, Plumlee, I do think is guaranteed to get you 25 plus minutes, maybe a shot at getting to 30 if things really align for him. There's really no world where Nurkic can do that. Even if you got like foul trouble for Mark Williams, you're probably still seeing Diabate then claim a few more minutes. So I don't love it. I just think he probably is an okay cash play, but I think for a tournament, I don't know if he gives you the upside.
Anything else for Charlotte?
No, the big three, I think, is it. And I hope Miles Bridges does right by you guys. He doesn't do right by many other people.
No, I'm sure he won't do right by me either, but I will be one of the least aggrieved people in his life. But now we go to Atlanta, and we got some news from Atlanta that I totally wasn't expecting today. Clint Capella out for family reasons. Hope everything's good. I didn't see the news. I hope it's just like a baby or something. Karis LeVert is probable. Trae Young is probable. Both of those guys were up in the air earlier today. So we lost the backup center, which probably doesn't matter, although certainly makes you feel a little bit better about Onyeka Okongwu, who is up to 7,100 now. Like I told you guys it was going to happen over the past 2 weeks, that price has climbed over $1,000. We knew we needed to get there. We knew we needed to be playing him. He's still underpriced. 31% owned, 30% optimal, ranked 6th in the boom bust tool at 7,100. I think the real interesting discussion is, should Okongwu have this much ownership over Mark Williams?
Interesting question. I mean, we have seen Mark Williams have a real big ceiling on slates, and it does seem like whatever post-Lakers trade funk was there, it seems like he's mostly shaken off and gotten his minutes back. I do think for Okongwu, it does feel psychologically very comforting to not have Capella there because you're not going to lose that 1 to 5 minutes of good play or just him being out there. They're going to try to get Okongwu on the court as fast as possible, especially with how many big men you have on the Charlotte side. So I like Okongwu. I'm basically holding hands to the field, getting him at 34%, Fields at 31 and change. But I think you're right to vocalize some, like, there's a lot of centers on the slate who are playable. Just because you don't have a Jokic, the main DraftKings slate, doesn't mean you don't have other playable centers. And it's a lot of ownership going to Okongwu when, the ceiling isn't always there for him in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think he deserves every bit of this ownership, but it is an interesting dynamic between Okongwu and Mark Williams. And it's mostly a playing time thing. Mark Williams projects as a better per minute performer than Okongwu, slightly higher price tag. But if you get the 30, like if they're playing the same amount of minutes today, which Mark Williams can do from time to time, Mark Williams will project as a better play than Onyeka Okongwu, or at least a neutral one using that extra $300. So I'm interested in that dynamic, but I still want to just get a bunch of Okongwu. My question then is, what do you want to do with the rest of Atlanta?
Not getting a lot of the rest of these guys. Trae Young, because of the rate decrease I've given to him, because he just doesn't do quite as much. From having the different mix out there of the Hawks that are no longer there, your Jalen Johnsons, your Bogdan Bogdanoviches, your DeAndre Hunters, to give the usual caveat here. I think for Trae, he's still a good enough play, but at 10K, I think there are better ways to spend the money. Projection-wise, I've just been low on him on pretty much every slate because I think there's more of a benefit to Dyson Daniels, to Okongwu, to LeVert and Yang in kind of different ways as well, to where the current Hawks rotation is as opposed to Trae. So I'm not here at all, really getting none of my top 150, getting Dyson Daniels at 9% with the field on that. But I could fade Trae here because I feel like you have enough options. I know you talked about the strategy show, but like even Harden, not a little more expensive. I think he looks better to me.
I think all of these guys that like play real minutes for Atlanta are more than reasonable in GPPs. And when I say all these guys, I mean like your Risachets, your Niangs. What do you want to do with a $3,700 power forward Mo Gay with no Capella here? Is he going to play a little alongside Okongwu, also as the backup center? Maybe just the backup center? Is Dominic Barlow going to encroach on this? His minutes are interesting to me if he's going to be playing between the 4 and the 5.
Yeah, it's a good call because Stokastic giving him 20 minutes right now, which I assume is just the normal run that he would get playing in the rotation, maybe getting a start, but probably not getting full run here. If he were to get the backup center minutes, I think that'd be appealing. And my brain, I thought basically Barlow takes whatever minutes are left behind by Capella. But if he does get closer to 25 as opposed to 20, he would look pretty interesting at 3,700. Still not sure he's a better value than some of the other guys on the slate, but I think it's a good call as like somebody who could be useful that right now the projections I just don't think would put you there.
I think that makes some sense. I'll have a couple shares, nothing too crazy, but I'm intrigued by his minutes today because they've got some wiggle room, but you almost need like that'd be a lineup where like I'd prefer to not have Okongwu but have Mark Williams. And then you're hoping that Okongwu plays 28 and Mo Gay becomes the benefit there. But I'm happy to use a couple extra pieces here. I think Trae looks totally fine, but I think Okongwu is the main event coming out of Atlanta.
Yeah, 125 implied points for Atlanta is a lot by their standards in general. Yeah,
massive total. So this game that we just talked about, Charlotte and Atlanta, very interesting from the DFS side. Oklahoma City and Boston, less interesting from the DFS side, way more interesting from I want to watch an actual basketball game. OKC, 2.5 point dogs in Boston, 229 total. Caruso, questionable with an illness. Unfortunately for us, the good Jalen Williams is out with the right hip strain, and they are going to make sure that he is fine before he comes back. So leaving OKC mildly shorthanded, if they're both of those guys are out, but they're one of the deeper teams in the league. What it is creating is nothing interesting. There's no ownership at all coming into anybody from OKC other than 20% to Shea. He's 11,400. I mentioned on the strategy show earlier today, he's more interesting on a day like today with no Jalen Williams because there's also no Nikola Jokic on the main slate. Obviously, Wemby's not around any longer. Giannis is not on this slate. So he is like one of the more premier fantasy point per minute pay up options. How do you want to manage Shea here? Because we just got done talking about a game that also has two pretty interesting point guard only dudes.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to get Shea to Trae by a good amount for myself. Like the rates without Jalen Williams are absolutely insane. I want to cite them fully because, like, for Josh, who's a little rate slut like I am, I think
I got one really for you. We don't have to worry about Scotty Barnes anymore. He's out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, boy, so everybody from Toronto up for grabs. But SGA, Josh, 1,700 possessions this year without Jalen Williams, the good Jalen Williams. 40% usage, 34% assist rate, 1.78 fantasy points per minute. You're talking he becomes Jokic, and his per 100 numbers, he's putting up like 45 points per 100. He's probably going to be out there for every possession possible versus Boston, you would think, in a game that he expects to be competitive. So I think he's actually a very fun pay up option to get to. 20% is where I'm targeting right now in terms of ownership. But if I could get more, if I could squeeze some out somewhere else, I would like to, because he's really the one Thunder player who I think looks playable. And if he just beats up on the Boston defense more than people usually do, which I would expect, I think the projection might be a little bit light from just those factors that really don't apply to SGA and how good he's been this year. He's got 64% true shooting on the year. It's insane.
Yeah. He's projected. He's got a points prop of 33.5 points. That's massive. I hope I can get to as much of him as I can. Ochai Agbaji ruled out as well.
No
Jamison Battle available to play.
Okay.
Yeah, the Shea one is just going to be interesting because of the other point guard options. Like, my guess is we have enough value and we end up getting to Shea and it's just fine. But I'm curious, does like getting to LaMelo and saving a bit of salary allow you to go from like a 7K guy to an 8K guy and make it a little bit more interesting? I haven't run any lineups or anything yet. I'm going to save that for the hour in between before I get to playback. But my expectation is that we have more than enough salary to get to Shea pretty easily. Jason Tatum in. Good. We're about to talk about him. Do you want anything else from OKC?
No, I mean, I really just don't see anybody else on paper gaining a lot. I think Hartenstein, it seems like rate-wise, gains a little. Weirdly, Chet, I had to kind of leave his rates alone and actually move him back to where they are normally because he gets less usage, less rebounding, less assists with Jalen Williams off, which I assume is a weird, smaller sample size thing. Wiggins, I think, kind of is a guy that could put up a bootleg Jalen Williams performance, and you won't get that fully acknowledged if SGA were to fail. I think it's probably because Wiggins went off offensively. But projection-wise, like SGA is there. These other guys aren't really there.
Is Wiggins like sneaky the best contract in the league, non like star edition?
I love Wiggins, man. That Friday, I know Josh hates the shitty team games where no good players are available, but like him being the lead dog on the Thunder, like he is electric out there. He plays good defense. He plays hard. He goes hard after things. He's got 61% true shooting on the year, and like frankly can absorb a lot more usage than he gets. I love Wiggins, man. I think like if I don't know what they would trade him for, but like if you're ever going to trade for a star for OKC to consolidate, he should be a part of that deal and should be like a featured part of it.
If they traded Aaron Wiggins, people are going to lose their minds when I say this. If they traded him straight up for something else, they'd be able to get 2 picks back with like little protections. He's on like a 5-year, $50 million deal. Descending too.
He's great. I mean, the defensive stats too are good for him. Like, which I care about a little bit less, but like he's really good at everything. He's also just fun to watch. Like I love him. He goes hard after the rim every time.
It's just a great dude to have in a playoff rotation that you could like mix and match and is going to fit with a bunch of people. Big Aaron Wiggins guy. Not going to be playing Aaron Wiggins today, but I did want to give him his flowers. Let's talk Boston. We just got the Jason Tatum news. We are still waiting on the Kristaps Porzingis news, I reckon.
No, he's supposed to go. I mean, he was at shoot around, so I think the assumption is
I'm just saying, like, we got Tatum in. We didn't get.
We didn't get the official confirmation yet. No.
Right. Yeah. So technically speaking, Kristaps Porzingis still questionable. Jason Tatum is available. No one's owned for Boston. 13% ownership. It's basically the exact same conversation we just had about OKC. Only Tatum is playing the role of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for today. What do you want to do with Tatum? Do you care about the rest of Boston?
Yeah, I want him less than SGA. I'm getting half the field on Tatum. Still getting 6%, but not the field's 12, getting 3% Jaylen Brown, Fields at 4. I don't mind these guys conceptually. I do think this game could be one that it happens a lot in DFS where you end up with a real competitive, real life game, and the projections don't fully account for the fact that these guys playing 4 quarters a run and like a playoff environment just push them to a higher level. But it's not really there in the data. So if you want to play one of the stars here, I could see it. But Tatum and Brown more than appropriately priced at this point, with Brown getting the markup from Tatum being out.
Yeah, I mean, I see nothing else here. Like, clearly Brown or White are fine in large field GPPs. Holiday too. Oh, there goes KP. He's out.
Oh, that's surprising. Shoot around just doesn't matter anymore. You show up to shoot around, that used to mean something, and now guys show up to shoot around, they don't play.
I especially expected him to play if he was showing up to shoot around and had been sick. Like, if you're bringing him back around now, I just kind of felt like he was probably good to go. But if it was viral, then I don't know.
Maybe his lungs are messed up a little bit, some pneumonias. I don't know.
That'll make Horford look a little bit better, but I think it's still just Tatum and essentially like nothing much else.
Brown gets closer, I think, with Porzingis being out, but I agree. Like,
that'll help. Yeah,
doesn't change the equation.
Yeah, incremental bump for those guys. Just to me, nothing that you're prioritizing here from Boston, other than watch this game. Even if they're going to be missing some people, it's still good basketball. I got nothing else here.
Yep, same pitch.
All righty. Well, schedule for the rest of the day. You're going to want this one. Live Before Lock is going to come up after us from 6:30 to 7. We have 3 games locking at 7:30. So you're going to get a boatload of news at the top of the hour that Greg and Eric are going to be able to break down. And then as we're getting towards the end of Live Before Lock, we're probably going to start getting some of the lineups and news for the 4 8 o'clock games. But at 7:30, Greg and I will be live on Playback, playback.tv/Stokastic. You could be there right now if you want. We'll be streaming games, talking ownership, late swaps, bets, whatever else is coming up. And you're going to want to be there for that half hour so that we can break down all the ownership changes and all the updated news for the 8 p.m. games. Totally free. You just go to playback.tv/Stokastic. If you have League Pass, you could link your account, watch the games, costs you nothing. If you don't have League Pass, you can get a VIP pass from us. We have 20 of them. You can watch the games. It costs you nothing. If you don't have League Pass and you don't get a VIP, it still costs you nothing. You just watch Playback the same way this show exists. You'll see both of us talking about everything that's going on. So you don't want to miss it. It's going to be very important today because it's going to be a sprint to the finish line at 8 o'clock. Hit that like button. Helps us out a lot. Okay. Well, we're doing this one again. The Philadelphia 76ers are 5-point favorites in Toronto, 221 total. The Toronto side is about to look very different. We'll see if we get any updated. We probably won't have anything by the time this one's done, but we got to talk Philly. Andre Drummond, questionable. Kelly Oubre, questionable. Gershon Yabusele, questionable. Late ad, too, I believe. Maxey out, Paul George out, everybody basically out. So right now there's basically no ownership coming into Philly. Tucker, we have his optimal rate way higher. So I think that ownership is either going to come up or our minutes are going to come down. It's not going to look like that for the next hour and a half. Something will find equilibrium. But there's nothing else coming in here because we need this news. Do you see anything actionable right now, or is this all just a hypothetical?
I think Lonnie Walker looks okay. I'm getting the 10% the field has there. I don't know that he's a great value now with the price tag coming up, and Oubre seemingly trending towards playing today, but I think he's still in Mix's value. Everything else here I'm not getting to, and I'm usually a Grimes guy. Of course, didn't get the Grimes day the other day because logically, no projection system out there had him for more than 30 minutes because he was supposedly being ramped down on a restriction. But no. He, in fact, is playing season-high levels of minutes and putting up 60 fantasy points. But the fact you get Oubre in at all is not good for Grimes either. So the price tag being up an insane amount. Grimes will probably strike again at some point, but I don't think it's today. The Philly side, just not really there. For me, but this game is an odd game, Josh. We were talking about it before the show. It's like these teams can both win play-in spots, and neither of them seemingly wants to do that. Sixers for good reason. They want to keep their pick. The Raptors, I don't know why you just don't make the play-in and just see what you can do with legit weapons on their team now.
I mean, I don't know. Like, they are 6th currently with a 10% chance of the number 1 overall pick. Maybe it's not as interesting as the play-in. I don't know. Apparently not. So, yeah, look, if Kelly Oubre, Gershon Yabusele, and Andre Drummond all get ruled out, this is going to go from an unowned team to a very owned team. If 2 of them get ruled out, we're probably going to have a lot of ownership. If 1 of them get ruled out and it's Oubre, we're probably going to get a little bit of ownership into these guys. But right now, it's kind of impossible to talk about. Philly is very much a live before lock team because they're going to get the news. They're going to get the updates. Because we could go from having no real ownership here to like chalk Lonnie Walker, chalk point guard, Ricky Council will get some love. Things will start to get a little odd. I mean, we might end up having a conversation about Adam Bona if Yabu and Drummond both end up out. So we kind of got to wait on it. I'd love to be able to talk about it a little bit more, but we don't have the information right now.
Quentin Grimes good though. I will say that definitively, and I think it's improving.
Yeah. I said it earlier today. I don't blame the Mavs. I blame the Pistons. They shipped him out for Tim Hardaway Jr.
Oh, okay. Wasn't Grimes on the Knicks at some point too?
Yeah, prior to that.
Yeah, and they chose McBride over him, didn't they? Like kind of
more or less, yeah.
Crazy.
Which, I could take that or leave that. Like if you got to pick one of them, I don't mind picking McBride. They seem to like McBride too, so. But I wouldn't pick Tim Hardaway Jr. over him, that's for sure.
No, I mean 61% true shooting. I know we talk about true shooting a lot in the show, but like he's shooting a legit number now, and he's with legit usage. He's your lead ball handler a lot. So if you're like shell shocked by the Grimes price tag, it's not as crazy as it might seem, even though today it might be crazy.
All right, so Toronto. 10 minutes ago, we got the news that we weren't going to have Scotty Barnes, Agbaji out, Jamison Battle in. They're already missing RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, Jonathan Mobo, Emmanuel Quickly, and Jacoby Walter. I got to really get that one dialed into my mind. I can't get it. So we were getting massive ownership before this, including 15% ownership to Scotty Barnes. Everything we're about to say is about to go up, or at least stay as crazy. 50% ownership to the number one ranked Jamal Shed at 4,400. 30% ownership coming into AJ Lawson, the number 2 guy coming out of the boom bust tool. Jared Roden is getting 25% ownership. He's number 7 in the boom bust tool. Let's get the easy ones out of the way. Jamal Shed, automatic cash game play, starting point guard, probably closes depending on how all of this breaks too. I don't know how you get away from Shed today.
Yeah, Shed is really the only legit point guard they have. He's been in the rotation, but also has played blowout minutes. So he seemingly should be locked into a good amount of run here. I would have him at about 21% usage, a little bit lower than that. 33% assist rate in court time without Quickly and Barnes, or not Quickly and, and Barrett and a few of the other, like Grady Dick, I think is the only guy I took off to get enough of sample size there. With Barnes being out now, he's going to absorb a lot of possession. So he's not a great player. Really, nobody in this team left is like a good shooter. They're not, a Quentin Grimes coming into a bigger role, but he'll get opportunity and he creates. So I think he's pretty much a must play now with Barnes out.
What about AJ Lawson? We saw him go crazy at no ownership on, I don't know, whatever day that was. Days are all the same. He's 4K shooting guard and basically just like a slightly not as good per minute version of Jamal Shed at a more difficult price or position to fill. I love him too. I think he looks just as good as Shed at less ownership.
Yeah, I was getting 75% of both guys before Barnes was ruled out. So, and I was getting 50% Barnes. So my stuff's going to move around a lot when we get the minutes update here. But Lawson, I do think last game is a little bit of an aberration for him, putting up, I think 12 rebounds there, double-digit rebounds, just doesn't seem in his bag. He's only averaging about 8 per 100 possessions, but he got lucky there because he played a ton of minutes. He isn't a willing 3-point shooter so far, putting up 12 per 100 possessions so far. So he's a guy that's going to get up shots, and he hit some of those shots last game and it worked out. I guess he got lucky too, taking minutes away from Roden, but now because Barnes isn't in, these guys both have to play a lot of wings. So I think that, yeah, Shed, Lawson were high plays for me. I think now they're probably in every lineup, and I think Roden's going to get close to every lineup too, even though probably the least confident about him.
Yeah, not the best per minute guy on Roden, but they're short on minutes. Shooting guard eligible 3,300. He plays 28 or something like he's been playing, and that's going to be a hell of a point per dollar option. So he's going to take a giant bump. How do you want to handle Jakob Poeltl, Orlando Robinson, and Colin Castleton? Because apparently the Raptors have no problem whatsoever playing massive minutes to 2 7-foot stiffs at the same time.
Yeah, I thought that was a good point by you in the strategy show this morning, that these guys are playing together, and some people think that's like a negative. And it's usually not. It's a positive when Şengün and Adams can play minutes together because they're not then capped to the 48. For these guys, though, it's like, I just don't know what they're doing. I don't get the logic for it. They're not really a good fit because none of them can stretch the floor at all. So what are you putting out a big man? Like, if you have 2 big men, one shoots some threes, but these are all guys hang around the rim. Castleton does screen a good amount. Poeltl gets away from the rim to screen too, but Poeltl's minutes shouldn't get that high because he's part of this group they're protecting and he's been banged up. So I don't think you can play him. He'll look pretty decent like as a play because of Barnes being out. But I don't think they're in play really. I think I just want the guards and the wings, and maybe that kills me here. Castleton's showing a little bit of life, though. I will say that for him. Watching him, and he's getting up some more shots, getting a few more assists. He's getting more involved, and as an aggressive screener, he might have more upside that he's shown so far.
All right, very quick question. Any interest in the 10% owned Jakob Poeltl?
No, I don't think you can go there. I mean, I really don't think the minutes get high enough. I think his projection will look good enough because of Barnes being out, but he's not going to get you 30 minutes, I don't think, no matter what.
All right, now the real question. Does Chris Boucher play?
Feels like he has to, but I know you beat the drum again pretty well in the strategy show where they just have not played a meaningful minutes since he had one good fantasy game in February. And he can play well enough, I think, to get on the court. But if they don't want to win, why do you play the guy who produces and maybe plays well? I don't know what to do with it. I like things like this, Josh, like start to break my brain because you see the different things coming together, the Zach Galifianakis math meme, and it's like, I don't know what they're doing, and I don't understand why they don't play Boucher, but if you don't want to win, you probably don't play Boucher.
They have 9 guys tonight, I believe, now that Barnes is out. One of those guys is Garrett Temple, and he extra special doesn't play. He's there to represent the players union, and that's about it. It feels like Boucher has to play, I'm very curious to see his minutes because I think that, like, if Chris Boucher can play 20 minutes today, he's probably like the best play of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I have him for 13 fantasy points in 11 minutes. So yeah, 20 minute. I don't know. I don't have him as high as I would have thought per minute, but 1.2 ish. So yeah, that could be good.
22 fantasy points. If you project him for 22 fantasy points, that's 6.9x his salary at 3,200.
He wouldn't be as
Scotty Barnes have to go somewhere now.
But they could play. I mean, so like practically, who would they play? They would play Castleton, Robinson, Pirtle, all 25 to 30 minutes each. Let's say you have the wings who can play 30 to 35. You have Battle who's going to play 20, 25-ish, 23 to 25. I don't know. There's like a ton of minutes that you have to play. Like you don't need to play Boucher if you don't want to.
I think he's going to be getting a decent chunk of ownership once we update because I don't know where else the minutes go. He's terrifying, but talk about boom bust. I'm very intrigued by what the projections look like once we finally get there. Keep your eye on it. Get ready for projections updates on Live Before Lock. Trust me, Eric is going to touch on Chris Boucher. Anything else for Toronto?
No, it's a fun situation. I mean, this is like your practice for full tanking season. You're getting a little taste of it now from Toronto, and really two teams that have no motivation that are playing for the opposite outcomes of not wanting to win. So it's fun. I think this is what makes DFS fun.
So this was going to be an awful game, but we got some news earlier today that changed that up a bit. Phoenix Suns 5-point dogs in Houston, 227 total. But we got Phoenix news that changes up the game a little bit, something that we weren't expecting. And that is Nick Richards is doubtful with right ankle soreness. And that is creating a little bit of ownership to $3,400 Mason Plumlee. He is 50% owned. He's going straight into a cash lineup. Great value. Minutes are there. At least you expect the minutes to be there. Are you just getting a bunch of Mason Plumlee?
Yeah, I'm getting him at 41%, so a little bit less than the field, and that might make it so maybe I get a little bit less with Toronto's value looking more crystallized. But I think he looks good. He closed last game over Nick Richards. Nick Richards actually played less minutes than Plumlee, so you're taking away those 23 minutes, and Plumlee got 26 minutes in that spot. Maybe, I mean, Inigo Daro, I guess, could run hot relative to whatever that means and steal some minutes back from Plumlee, but he's projected right now for 26 minutes and looks good at a 0.9 fantasy point per minute pace. So if he gets to 30, he probably pays off the price tag, comes close to it. So he's a good value. It's just, does he get you to 30 fantasy points? I don't know how often that happens.
I don't know how you get away from him right now, but we're bound to see a bunch of real dumb shit over the next 90 minutes that can create some more value. So we'll see. He's the priority right now coming out of Phoenix. Getting a little bit of ownership coming into Royce O'Neal at 3,700, another value play if you need one at one of the forward spots. But there's no ownership coming in Durant or Booker. I don't mind him in the large field, like in the lotto tonight or anything like that. But it's pretty much just Plumlee and then scattered shares of Durant, Booker, Beal, O'Neal.
Yeah, O'Neal, you're getting because of the Grayson Allen being out thing. He'll get a few more minutes. He might end up closing, I guess, potentially. So yeah, I don't mind O'Neal getting him at 15%, though that might come down a little bit because of the Raptors stuff and losing Barnes. But yeah, I think there's a couple of viable plays here. And, and I'm with you on Durant and Booker being always playable, basically.
Any bowl squared?
No, not for me right now with him only getting 20 minutes. I guess if there were a world that he picked up the start. I mean, it's when you have Beal in, I feel like Bull doesn't become a play, but they could do something weird and maybe play him at center. I just don't know why they would.
CTG Policia says, hopefully Eric asked for consent before touching on Chris Boucher. And then I do need to hit on this super chat very quickly. Shano tried to get me with saying a bunch of double entendre names. So I ain't reading that, brother, but I appreciate your $2. Not going to get me. I'm not new to this. Grady Dick's out today. You got to make a different lineup, brother. Let's go to Houston. The Rockets. Favorites in this one. We're getting a 20% owned Dylan Brooks. We're getting a 20% owned Alperen Şengün and a 15% owned Tari Eason. Amin Thompson and Reed Shepherd are both out. Fred VanVleet, welcome back. All three of those guys are basically the same ownership. Do you have a preference in Houston?
I like Şengün the most here, getting 27% of him, and I do think he's a strong play, just shy of that 10K price tag. He's really one of those guys that gets a little bit more from having Amin Thompson off the court, who does steal. I mean, not steal, but does get his own share of rebounds and assists, more flow Şengün's way in terms of the rate. So, yeah, I like him a good amount. I'm getting Dylan Brooks comparable amount, though. I feel less good about that. I would be happy to replace Dylan Brooks with Raptors players X or Y. But Şengün, I always love. So getting him on a slate with no Jokic, I'll get the bootleg Jokic.
Another reminder, Steven Adams and Alperen Şengün have been playing alongside of each other a bit. We talked about that earlier, so keep that in mind. Don't think it matters all that much for today. As I'm looking at it, I prefer Şengün here, but the problem is we're loaded with center options. We talked about Mark Williams. We talked about Onyeka Okongwu. We talked about Plumlee. Who am I missing? There's another one, right?
Yeah.
Not yet.
I feel like I missed your entire list. Mark Williams.
Either way, all of those guys are getting a decent chunk of ownership. So still interested in Şengün, but I don't know how center is going to break for me just yet. I'm happy to get some Eason or Brooks. I'd be very surprised if I get anything else, but like a little intrigue as a GPP play for Jalen Green. His boom rate looks pretty good. People probably not going to think about him all that much because of Van Vliet being back, but I wouldn't say there's any sort of major priorities from Houston, but Brooks, Şengün, and Eason are well worth their ownership at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on Eason too. Adams also not an awful play, though I think the value might make them look a little bit less, useful. But I got him at about 12% of my sim, so he was popping in a little.
Okay. I don't really have anything else here for Houston. This is kind of like an uneventful spot to talk about.
No, I like Şengün though. I think like him beating up Plumlee / Iguodaro / if they trot ball out there, like Şengün could feast here. So I do like him.
Let's remember, guys, signing up at Stokastic is very easy. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. I'm going to mention it now. Whether you want to sign up for the sim tools on the DFS side or the portfolio EV tool on OddsShopper, you can do it and it's not going to cost you anything at all. If you're already at a sportsbook or a pick'em site and you haven't signed up at some of the others, you can sign up there, use whatever deposit they're looking for. It could be $25 potentially. You get a bonus when you do it. Email us, let us know it all happened. Follow the instructions at the top of the screen. The link is in the description or in chat. And you're going to get a month of whatever tool that is for totally no cost. You'll pay us nothing. You can cancel at any time. If it's not your key, you'll have it till the end of the deal and then you need to go. I think you're going to stick around, whether it's watching Greg's bankroll challenge, turning $100 into $1,000 over the first $100 or first 100 days of the season. We've got Nathan, Laffy, Eitan, Eric. I know I'm missing more people. We've got tons of content coming out on Portfolio EV every single day. If you want to get a little bit more information on why it's so awesome, I want you guys to trust me. But if you need more info, go check out those threads. Everything is being tracked right now. We have all of the historical data. Can't really say much about it because it's just awesome. And then on the Sims side, you guys know the drill. Stokastic at the top of the heap. You constantly see our avatars. You could use that avatar, finish top 3 in a contest with 5,000 or more entries, get a free month for doing that. Or use this link, sign up through one of our partners, and get a month of the Sims for yourself. We got a lot going on for you guys. It's very easy to get in the door, and you don't even have to pay us a cent to do it.
You forgot to mention what DN's been doing with OddsShopper. That's all the names that you listed.
With what?
What DN's doing?
DN?
He's nuts. I was actually thinking I should just list like a fake name and see if you knew everybody at the company, but I thought D's nuts worked better.
News guy just said my audio has been shitty. Did you notice that?
It broke up for a second, but you were okay after that.
Okay. It might have been when I changed the assets because I'm sharing a billion things right now. So let me know if it's happening again when we're like on a stationary screen. Spags, if you hear it, just tell me immediately.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was just your connection breaking up. Chat saying I got you, by the way. So thank you, chat. Chat's on my side.
Got him. Glad I don't have that on a soundboard.
Got you.
Utah Jazz, 12-point dogs, $100,000 lighter in the bank account because they're always jerk-offs about their injuries. 246 total. Highest pace, highest total. Unfortunately, still waiting on some Jazz news. Keontae George is out. Micah Potter is out. Jordan Clarkson's questionable. Lauri Markkanen's questionable. We're getting 20 to 25% ownership on Collins and Sexton, and then that's it for everything from Utah. Maybe that changes a little bit if those Q tags end up a little bit different. How do you want to manage Sexton and Collins here? Because we saw Sexton finally get his minutes bumped back up to 30, which scares the hell out of me, depending on what they're going to do today. And then Collins just looks really good, I think.
Yeah, Collins has been great this year. I know we've talked about it on the show before, and now that he's actually playing minutes again, and the Jazz getting fined, which is such an arbitrary thing for the NBA to do. The Jazz
getting in, by the way.
Oh, marketing in?
And Clarkson.
Yeah, okay. So I saw the marketing one. Did not see Clarkson. So yeah, those guys being in seems like they have to play. They don't have to play in big minutes if they don't want to. Collins at least has been in the rotation getting minutes. And he's been a 1.15 fantasy point been a producer on the year. Like him more when you get Marketing or Kessler out, but I could take the shots with the minutes there. Ownership feels a little bit high, but I am getting him in 33% of my lineup so far. And Colin Sexton, I'm with you. The minutes being there. If you get Keontae George out, there's just more usage to go around, more opportunity in the guard spots. And even with Clarkson coming in, like there's more than enough minutes to be there. So Clarkson too, it's not like he's going to press his minutes that highly. So I think Sexton looks good, which he hasn't looked for lots this year, but that price tag is low. Raptors value might make Sexton's ownership come down a little, but I still think he's worth around 20.
I can't believe you hit me with the D's nuts, man.
I've never done that before to anybody either. Like I don't do the D's nuts bit, but it just felt right.
Wow. You walked me right into it. Any chance you're going to get to anything else from Utah other than Sexton or Collins? Because these guys look fully uninteresting.
No, I mean, if those guys are all in, it's like you lose Sensabaugh minutes. These guys are priced for rotations that, are not going to exist today. So yeah, I'm not a marketing guy either. I'm not there. Really don't see anything else here.
All righty. On the Memphis end, we are waiting on some more injury news. Aldama already out. Obviously, Triple J out. Q-tag Brandon Clark. Q-tag Zach Edey. 33% ownership coming into Vince Williams. 20 to Desmond Bane. 10 to Ja Morant. I like those three guys at their ownership numbers. Happy to get the Vince Williams value at shooting guard, small forward, but we do now have even more of it on the Toronto side. Bane's just playing massive minutes. Maybe that slows down a little bit against Utah, but he should carve these guys up. What are you cornering the market on for Memphis? How do you think the Q tags will matter for you?
I'm getting 20% Desmond Bane. So I died on the altar of Desmond Bane the other night. He and Najee did not get where I would really hoping they were going on that slate, but thank God Jaylen Brown did. Besides that, though, Bane, I think, is still in a good situation. The rates for him are good per minute. Starts to look a lot more like Ja Morant when you get Jaren Jackson off the court, along with Santi Aldama as well. I like Bane enough. I think the 20% ownership, I'm good with that. Would love to get a little more Ja Morant, only getting 5% of him, Fields at 10. I think if Bane fails, it's likely because Ja Morant had a good day like we saw last time out. So I would be there. Vince Williams value, at this point, I would not play that. I don't know why you would. There's better value, so I would take him. I wouldn't take him out of the pool, but like he shouldn't be 25% owned.
I'm going to have a bunch of Vince Williams, I'm expecting.
Really?
I love that dude. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's firmly set now. Well, it depends. Like if Edey and Clark can both be out, that'll help a little bit more. Obviously, not the same positions, but just shortens up the amount of guys they could use. But he's a fantasy point per minute guy. We know he can play 24 now. I expect them to continue to ramp him up a little bit. I'm very intrigued by that price tag. I think he's going to be like 4,600 in a week and a half or 2 weeks, kind of like a Kongwu. I still want to take it right now. Now, maybe that changes when I start seeing everything coming out of Toronto, but like I think he still looks really good because of his price and position.
It's hard for me when you have Morant and Bane in, and then you also have Kennard and you have Pippen getting some amount of minutes. Like it's starting to get a little bit log jammy, I think, but like he's been producing. You're right about that. So, and again, the minutes have been coming up, so it could happen. I think Toronto value when you have no star players there. I'll take that every time.
Yeah, sure. And anything else you want to add here for the rest of these guys? Because like if Edey and Clark end up out, we're gonna have some conversations about G.G. Jackson, Lamar Stevens, Jay Huff, Marvin Bagley. Like something's gonna pop up there at some point in time. But for right now, it's Bane, Morant, Williams, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of these guys. But I think they've got a lot of GPP flyers.
Yeah, I mean, with 129 implied points for the team, another really high total, you could take shots or whatever. But I think getting some exposure to Morant and Bane with that high total makes a lot of sense. And then, yeah, the secondary guys, I'm with you. Like Jackson and Huff took a lot of shots on those two guys last times out when you had both Clark and Edey out. I would do that again today with really just a crazy total. Good matchup versus Utah. So you need guys out, I think.
Big time pace, big time total in this game. A lot of fantasy points to go around. Make sure you're grabbing them. Let's go to game number 6. The LA Clippers taking on the Miami Heat. Clips are 2-point dogs in Miami, 206 total. This game is 9 possessions slower than the game we just talked about and 40 points lower in a game total. And yet we're still getting to the Clippers today, which is fun. No Kawhi Leonard on the back-to-back. Still no Norm Powell, no Ben Simmons. 10% ownership to Zubats, who looks great, but is just hamstrung by a center slate that's absolutely insane. 15% ownership to James Harden, 15% ownership to Bogdanovich. Not much else coming into the rest of these guys. How are you prioritizing Harden, Zoo, and Bogey?
So I'm getting Harden in 25% before, the stuff that we haven't been able to run yet. So Harden was a key part of what I'm doing. I think Josh pointed out pretty well in the strategy show this morning that Harden is not our vintage Harden anymore. He's not getting shots at the rim. He's kind of brute forcing his way to good days, but I'll take the brute force days because the usage has been high enough. Court time without Kawhi, it's been, even better, but I kept his rates low because if I juiced the rates for without Kawhi, I would get endless Harden. As it is though, I'm getting him at 25%. I think that's an appropriate mark for him, even though totals here look bad. Like Josh mentioned, pace looks bad. Clippers in Miami, even though the Vegas total accounts for it, doesn't feel great knowing James Harden as we do. But these guys here, you saw what they could do with Kawhi. Obviously a softer matchup. I think with Kawhi out, I think we know what Harden and Zubac can do as well. Zubac get about 20%. I'll still take some shares there. No Bogdan for me. I don't think we need it on the slate.
Yeah, not a huge priority for me at this point. But the minutes are likely to be there. So I don't mind if I get to any of it. I just don't expect I'm going to have a ton of him. I'd love to get to more Zoo. I think he looks like an interesting pivot to some of the aggressive center ownership that's out there. But tough matchup. You got the double bigs going on the Miami side, and they're not horrific defenders by any means. So that's complicated a bit. I don't really want anything else. Are you looking at Dunn or Batum or Derek Jones or anything like that?
No, I don't get a lot of those guys. And really on the slate to me, where there are just so many available possessions and shots, those guys just wouldn't be players I would want to get to even as pivots.
All righty. Well, then let's move it over to the Miami Heat, who are fully unowned. And Alec Burks just got ruled out. Essentially, everybody else for the Heat are available. Do you like anybody from Miami?
I was getting Wiggins at 5% before the show, so I think that's an okay number to have for him. He's been producing fairly well as a Heat player, and the price tag at 6,500, small forward only on DK. It's not a bad one for that spot, but really nothing looks that great here. It is a down-paced spot against the Clippers defense that is at least on paper good, even though this version of the team is not the best. I just hate the Clippers on back-to-backs too. I've played them enough on back-to-backs that it goes terribly often for both sides of the equation. And the price tags are up for Miami too. Like Bam Adebayo's been good, but I don't want to pay that much for him. So really nothing for me.
No, I don't. The total blows in this game. They've got everybody in. That's not helping matters at all. This game's going to double OT. Like
it's gonna the game you needed 7 players from with a couple Raptors on top.
I truly do not understand how you could possibly go to any sort of volume of the Miami Heat. You want Bam or Hero or Wiggins? Sure. These guys are going to play 30 plus minutes. They're the real dudes. You can go there. They are not exciting today.
No.
I have nothing else to say about Miami. The less we say, the better. Because we do have to talk about this next one. Are you sick of the Dallas Mavericks yet? Because you should be. Hit that like button, by the way, guys. We got to keep running that number up. We got about 2,200 people in on the YouTube side. If you could run that number up as high as possible for Live Before Lock, I know those guys will appreciate it. Let's talk through Dallas and San Antonio. We're running back the Dallas nonsense once again as we look at the Dallas injury report for right now. And it's a doozy because they're still missing a bunch of bodies. Q-tag Dante Exum, Q-tag PJ Washington, Q-tag Brandon Williams. If everybody's in, then Dallas is going to be like relatively uninteresting. Random GPP plays at best. Or they're going to have 7 bodies with a fake active 8th. How the hell do you do this? Is there anything we could do right now? Do you have any leans on their status?
So Brandon Williams, I don't know how he would play because he hurt his hamstring on Sunday. So we're in the same spot where I don't think he should really be a Q tag. PJ Washington coming back and I could buy, but I'm with you if both these guys are in and going to play actual minutes. The team looks so much worse. Washington in particular being in, he's not priced well enough to play himself. He's killing all these guys with their price tags. Like I don't think he can play Najee Marshall at that price tag. Klay Thompson, I think, is still playable, getting 10% of him with these guys being assumed in, but I'm not really sold on that. I really don't love Dallas today. I've played a lot of Dallas the last few weeks, as many of us have, but I don't think it's a spot for these guys, and there's not really any ownership coming, so you don't need to lever against your Najee Marshall with a Dinwiddie like last time. I just don't think this game is worth it. If these guys are in, if they're out, then back and play.
Yeah. If they're in, I don't think that I'm going to have tons of Dallas. I'm still going to be very surprised if Brandon Williams plays, although if he does and we lose PJ Washington and Exum, he's going to look really good. I don't know if PJ Washington is going to play enough minutes. He's going to scare me. Exum, I just don't really have any interest in one way or the other. It's up in the air because they might legitimately have 7 guys and a fake 8th active, and we don't know that yet. That is going to be very important news for Live Before Lock and for Playback. I'm not going to have much, but we have 4 games at 8 o'clock. We should be able to move it around whenever we get that news. But for right now, make sure you're watching Live Before Lock for the Dallas Mavericks. We close it out with the Spurs on the DraftKings side. Now, they also have some injury news. Jeremy Sohan questionable. Devin Vassell questionable. Vassell pulling 20% ownership. His minutes and have been great lately. Salary and position are awesome. He's 20% owned. I think he deserves every bit of it. Everybody else is like 5% owned. So if Vassell's in, what do you want to do? Do you like anything else? And if he's out, what changes?
So Vassell, if he's in, I want to play him close to the field, getting him at 20%, Fields at 25%. I've mentioned a few times on these shows, but like Fox just doesn't gain enough rate-wise from Wemby being out. It's actually been kind of a worse version of his Sacramento self with that. And it could change on a game-to-game basis for sure with Fox being not owned. But Vassell gains in usage. Keldon Johnson will rip games away from everybody else at times. These guys all get an uptick. So I think that Vassell looks okay. Keldon Johnson, I'm also getting at 15%. The latter probably comes down a little bit for me with some of the value opening up, but I think Vassell is in play. I think he looks good enough. Chris Paul, 6% for him with the field. I don't think he's bad. Fox, I feel like just has to play better at some point, but the price tag's high. Is this a tournament option? It's just interesting that nobody's going to be there, but he's been kind of dog shit lately.
Yeah, there's really not much here. I like Vassell quite a bit. If he's out, Keldon Johnson probably ends up being the guy I end up getting the most here from San Antonio, or maybe Castle at that point too, but certainly not Bismack Biyombo at 4,700.
No, not on this slate in particular.
All right, that concludes the DraftKings portion of this show. 7 up, 7 down. We still have FanDuel to talk about. We got 2 more. We got Minnesota, Denver, New York, and Portland that we are going to touch on. So don't go anywhere. We're still here. And for you FanDuel crazies, congratulations. You're in luck. We're about to talk about you guys because we're going to game number 8, 10 o'clock start, Minnesota and Denver. We've got a 3-point dogs. That would be Minnesota heading into Denver right now. 233 total. On the injury report for Minnesota, we got a Q tag on Rudy Gobert. That's the only relevant injury news for them. About 10% ownership coming into Edwards and Randall. You see anything that's standing out to you from Minnesota here in elevation? Because I don't think they look all that interesting.
Now, same page as you.
In.
Okay. So, yeah, same page as you. Nothing for Minnesota looking that great to me. Anthony Edwards, you can take the shot, obviously, competitive game. Playing altitude, I don't really care that much for him. Everybody else here, I feel like the price tags don't look that good for FanDuel or the DK late slate. So, Anthony Edwards, any slate, you can take your shot, especially on FanDuel, where I think sometimes the FanDuel guys and the games that are FanDuel exclusive get a little bit overlooked ownership-wise from what I've seen. Ant might appeal more, but not enough to really care about.
Yeah, we've got Ant and Randall both at 11% optimal, 10% ownership. That looks great. All the 5% owned guys are all 5% optimal or lower. So there's not a lot to talk about for Minnesota, and playing in Denver is rarely a good spot. Then we get to Denver. The Nuggies have a doubtful tag on Aaron Gordon, Jokic, and Murray, both probable. And it's sort of like the whole starting 5 is getting 10% ownership. Murray, Jokic, Brown, Porter, Westbrook. They all look pretty similar. I think Westbrook actually might be the best option on the FanDuel side, but I don't have an individual I want specifically from Denver. Clearly, you could take Jokic whenever you want, but he is $13K today.
Yeah, the 13K on Fan. I mean, he's priced appropriately. You probably should have been priced like this for a couple months, especially when he's on the really hot run a while ago. But I think Westbrook and Porter Jr. look a little bit better than usual today, but still not priority plays, I think, relative to this slate. And Jokic, brave take here. You can play Jokic on any slate, but if you get Gobert in, the matchup gets a little bit less appealing. Not that matters for Jokic. But nobody's going to pay that 13K. And I did see yesterday for the Stochastic Sims or the last Denver game, if Jokic comes a little bit lower owned, the Sims do like getting these guys who are just people that want to pay the price tag and you can find it a value. So Jokic, always worth to me 10 to 20% ownership on a slate.
Yeah, I think these Denver guys are all just like perfectly set up to be 10% owned on the FanDuel end.
Yep.
Which, not a lot you can do with that. There's not a lot of takes. We got a little bit of positive leverage on Westbrook in the, if you look at the data hub right now, currently projected for 16% optimal, 12% ownership. mind the idea of getting a little bit more. And obviously, if you like Jokic today, play him. It's Nikola Jokic. It'll feel good more often than not. I mean, the dude's a walking triple-double. And then we get to the final game. The New York Knicks, 4-point favorites in Portland, 228 total. The Mikal Bridges allegedly talked to coach and said, play the bench a little bit more. Dottier is questionable. Jalen Brunson out. Huckporty out. Kevin McCullough out. 35% ownership coming into an 8K. Josh Hart, 10% to Anunoby, 10% to Bridges, 10% to McBride, close to 10% on Karl Anthony Towns. How do you feel about that Josh Hart chalk?
Yeah, I mean, I get it with the FanDuel price tag. I certainly don't mind him when you get Brunson out. Just everybody who's left behind, in particular Hart, Towns. I would say McBride being the big ones who benefit from not having Brunson on the court. So I'm okay with it. Towns too. I feel like I haven't gotten to play him on a DK slate in a while, but he's one of those guys I'll take whenever you can get him as an option, especially it's center. And these FanDuel games too. Just I really have to drill it home a little bit. I think they end up a little bit under owned because people also the content around the industry, they don't hear it. People don't hear people talk about Towns as much today. They just don't play him as much. And versus Portland, we have seen Andre Drummond abuse them. So I think Towns can get results if in a game without Brunson. And McBride is a value play. It's not quite as good as the other value plays in the slate. I think he's still okay here. DK late slate as well looks like a decent, mid-tier value option.
And then we close it out before lock with the Portland Trailblazers. Every single player for Portland is sub 10% owned right now. Ayton still out. Jeremy Grant doubtful. Matisse Thybulle questionable. We're going to dust him off for the first time this season potentially. And then Time Lord also questionable. He's been missing for a bit. All that's doing is creating a team of sub 10% optimal, sub 10% ownership guys. And unfortunately, that makes it so I don't have an individual I would take from Portland, but you get some Simons, Kamara, Sharp, or Denny lineups. And I think that's fine if you have 5 to 10% of them.
It used to mean something when Jeremy Grant was out. Now I feel like it doesn't. Like Avdia is kind of the same player he is anyway. He's priced appropriately. He still is the guy I think is your kind of net winner overall. But these guys are all priced. They've had various players out for enough time, including Ayton, who's probably, I would say at this point, he's got to be done for the year, right? So Portland is just kind of priced for everything that's already going on here, and it's not a great matchup.
Well, that'll do it, folks. 9 games up, 9 games down, a hell of a deeper dive. Lots of news yet to come, and live before lock is about to get started. Spags, tell the people where to find you.
You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Spags. Check out my NBA channel, which I will be taking a couple days away from. Won't be on the deeper dive tomorrow. Going to do a little family vacation, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. But at Splash Play NBA, Monday to Friday, normally at 4 p.m. And I got Josh with the D's and nuts. So this is a great slate for me, no matter how it goes from here.
All righty, guys. Thank you very much. Hit that like button in the interim. Greg and Eric, live before lock, coming up right now.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome to NBA Live Before Lock, where, as is usual, we get news just in between the deep dive and Live Before Lock. Now, not earth-shattering news or anything like that, but Yabusele was just ruled out. We got Andre Drummond, who was questionable, game time decision, so we should know his status in, 30 minutes, something like that. So do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. For the people who are watching in playback, apologies, but the screen sharing stopped working. So I just threw on the pregame of one of the basketball games. So at least there's something on the screen there. You guys will see players shooting around and whatnot. But yeah, for whatever reason, it's like screen lock to Josh. He's the only one who's allowed to screen share right now. So yeah, I have no clue why it is that we can't show some of the portfolio EV projections in there, but outside of our control. So it is what it is. Eric and I are both in there. You'll hear us talking, but I'll try to add other stuff to the screen as we go over there. But for right now, not all that much we can do about it. Eric, how are you doing on this fine evening?
I'm just confused because I turned on playback. I'm watching the shoot around. Kemba Walker's out there taking shots with Charlotte.
Is he an assistant coach or something?
He is either an assistant coach. He's the guy under the basket right now who is just sitting there dribbling in the gray sweats. If you're watching, just shot a layup left-handed there. I'm so confused what he's doing there.
All right. Well, we got an NBA slate to break down here for you guys. And as far as the injury information goes, we do have one caveat to slate as well. The two late games, they're going to be on the FanDuel slate. They're not on the DraftKings slate. So DraftKings slate, 7 games. FanDuel slate, 9 games. Just mentioned Yabusele has been ruled out. Andre Drummond is questionable. PJ Washington is questionable. Devin Vassell is questionable. Rudy Gobert is questionable because apparently he's just questionable every single day with some sort of various ailment for whatever reason. Jeremy Sochan, he is questionable. We also have Brandon Williams questionable. Dante Exum questionable. That especially matters when you consider that Brandon Williams is questionable because, you look at Dallas today, Eric. We liked a lot of the pieces the other day. We had Spencer Dinwiddie was good to us. If you get PJ Washington, Brandon Williams, and Dante Exum out, do you know how many available players Dallas is going to have?
That'd be 7. So you can't do it. You have to have one in.
Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, Spencer Dinwiddie, Max Christie, Caleb Martin, who's limited, Dwight Powell, who's limited, and then Kess Letters. So it's not only 7 players, but of those 7, 2 of them are on minutes restrictions. So like you said, they have to, or else they have to forfeit the game. They have to have at least one of these guys active. We might get a report, though.
Oh, my God. Well, stop. It's rolling in right now as you're talking about
They always listen to us, don't they?
Brandon Williams available to play. Didn't see that one coming. Here we go. Nick Richards ruled out. Give me all the Plumlee and all the land. And Grayson Allen ruled out. Oh, man. This is going to be disgusting. But PJ Washington out. So that's the first domino to fall.
Just because Brandon Williams is available to play doesn't mean he plays, though.
Correct.
Which is what I was about to get at. And then they just graced us with the news here. But like we said before, they have a total of 7 players we know for sure are healthy. Brandon Williams available to play. PJ Washington's ruled out. Dante Exum is now questionable. If Exum gets ruled out, they have to have Brandon Williams available just in an emergency situation. But he could absolutely end up being a healthy DNP who they just had to activate so that they had enough players so they don't have to forfeit the game.
Yeah, it's going to be a starting lineup thing for me. If Brandon Williams plays and he doesn't start, probably have 0%. If he starts, it's the biggest headache ever because he's a phenomenal play. He's not going to be appropriately owned depending on when that news comes out. And you have to kind of blindly take some shots on it. Now, he was moving around pretty well in that shoot around from 2 days ago. We saw the video that DK sent to us, which we appreciate, obviously, when we're on the show. It is imperative that you remember that you need to have 8 active. If Brandon Williams is not starting, they could legitimately just play 7 guys. My impression is with Dante Exum still questionable, that it's kind of like a question of I don't think he would end up being your starter, but could play maybe 20 minutes, 22 minutes. Probably wouldn't want to consider him all that much. But Brandon Williams, if he starts or if he doesn't, they're just 2 completely different things today.
Yeah, and we'll get more information there. For what it's worth, we did get a follow-up. Dante Exum, who, by the way, is also dealing with a hamstring injury. It's very rare that guys have hamstring injuries and turn around quickly, but that's the state of the Mavericks. They have so few players available. The fact that Dante Exum is going to be a game time decision and Brandon Williams was ruled active in advance actually does make me feel a little bit better about Brandon Williams playing, because if they actually needed him just for the emergency situation, I think they would have waited until the status of Exum was known, right?
Correct.
That's at least the logic I'm applying to it.
Yep, I'm with you. Yeah, and again, there's a lot of tea leaves you can look at, and then the tea leaves don't mean shit when it's Jason Kidd. So like, we have to remember that this is the coach that lies the most out of any coach in the entire National Basketball Association, other than maybe your good friend Doc Rivers. It is really tough for me to want to play though any Brandon Williams if he ends up not starting. And then the exact opposite. It's just such a gross situation. Let's just be honest. But Dante Exum, my guess is that they're going to end up sitting him when it's all said and done.
Yeah, we'll see. By the way, I'm trying to exit and rejoin playback to see if that makes a difference. But it's somebody in chat said that there's something wrong with my input. That's not possible, because or else people wouldn't be able to hear me on the StreamYard side of things and on the YouTube stream. So it's something weird with playback. How about now? Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me on playback now? I left and came back.
Eric having a conversation with himself. Sounds like every day.
Yeah. But the other thing that's confusing is that some guys are saying they can hear me. Then other people say they can't hear anybody. Then people say they can only hear you.
Makes for a better show.
All right. I don't know what else to do to make my audio work over on playback. I'm not muted or anything, so I really have no clue.
Does this mean that I have to like say whatever you just said for the question on the front end so that they have context before I talk? All
right. Well, guys, just if you want to listen to the show, come hop into YouTube, and we'll be able to. You guys could, people in YouTube say they could hear me there. So I don't know why the audio is not coming through on both platforms. But anyway, Eric, we've got this Dallas news. That's obviously going to be pretty big to this slate. We'll have projections updates coming here soon for Dallas, and we'll throw those up on screen when that is all updated. Outside of the Dallas situation, what else for this slate do you think is going to be massively important as far as the injury news goes to your lineups?
Yeah, Philly just came out with everything except for Andre Drummond. We didn't get Andre Drummond news, which matters. Kelly Oubre's in. We have Yabusele out, so Justin Edwards becomes a conversation. But I mean, I've got a bona Fabona if you end up getting that to go. I mean, wanted to play him the other night, and it just didn't really make sense in the context of that slate with some 3K guys. But I think on this slate specifically, who else plays center for Philly today? Like, who else plays center other than Adam Bona? This Reese character isn't a real person. Alex Reese, I don't even believe it.
Yeah, so in the event, and once again, this is the question that Eric posed to me, is in the event that there is none of Andre Drummond today. Because if Drummond plays, it obviously changes the equation. Correct. But Yabusele's already been ruled out. You look at other big men, I really do think by default it's just going to be Alex Reese, because they're not going to play Bona 48 minutes.
Right.
And also, these games don't matter to the Philadelphia 76ers. Right. They're trying to lose anyway. They got a very important game to lose against the Toronto Raptors. It's why Toronto's also ruled out all their guys. This is going to be the shittiest game imaginable. These teams putting zero effort into winning. But assuming Drummond's out, we're probably looking at like 28 minutes from Bona and then like 20 from Alex Reese.
There you go. And that's what I'm getting at, is that I think Bona, 3,500, we got to at least be very, very interested in the event that there's no other serviceable center. Justin Edwards is your other guy. It's also going to make, like, I know Pirtle is on a minutes limit, and obviously we have a million Toronto pieces to talk about, so we can get there. But, like, I mean, how much is Jakob Pirtle just going to slam at 6K in his 30 minutes of time against Adam Bona and Alex Reese? My answer is probably pretty well. He probably slams pretty well. So it's definitely a Toronto spot where we have 4 or 5 of the top 8 owned pieces, but we got to go through this entire game with a fine-tooth comb. And obviously if Adam Bona becomes a thing, it's going to look even better than it does, which is insane.
I find it very hard to believe Pirtle's playing many minutes today, though.
That's what I said, like 30 capped. Like,
no. I think he's playing well underneath that.
No, I am too, but I'm saying like there's no 30-minute upside. I'm just saying like 26, 28. I think is definitely still live.
Yeah, we've got him in for 27. I think he's going to play less than that. If you just look at how the Raptors have handled their rotations. So Pirtle, here's what he's played his last 5 games. 24 minutes, 23 and a half, 26, 22 and a half, 24 and a half. I think we're getting 22 to 24 minutes from Pirtle.
Massive foul trouble in 2 of those. I was watching him. Massive foul trouble.
But he's also just not he's also not closing games anyway.
Oh, that's true. I mean, yeah, he's had massive foul trouble where he had like 5 and then Toronto's not trying to actively win. So I totally get it. But I mean, they kind of just have Orlando Robinson that can come in and play the scoop up duty. I mean, he's played a lot more here recently. It's almost been like a 24-24 split at times, but there's been a tiny bit of overlap. Not as much overlap as we've seen with the Houston center position, which I don't even want to talk about today. Thank God. Just something from a betting perspective that's driving me nuts. But I do think Toronto here, Jakob Poeltl, 27 minutes, I think is actually probably closer to the right projection because he's had some insane foul trouble in a couple of those games recently.
We have a terrific super chat here. An absolutely terrific super chat. We've got one from CTG Policia who says, hopefully Eric asks for consent before touching on Chris Boucher today. Eric, is Chris Boucher somebody you like for today's slate? And just to throw the graphic up here as well, I have to know. I absolutely have to know. Is he somebody you're liking for today? Chris Boucher, he's somebody you've liked quite a bit in the past.
Maybe a little bit.
I wasn't sure if you were just trying to be creepy, if you somebody you actually like for your lineups. But yeah, I mean, I think Chris Boucher is a pretty reasonable GPP target. He's only $3,200. We have him projected for 34 minutes, for 34% ownership. In just 19 minutes, he's projected for 22 fantasy points. If I'm correct, the Jakob Poeltl is not going to be playing very many minutes today. You start to look at our projections here, where we've got Poeltl in for 27. We've got Orlando Robinson in for 24. If we're going to take 5 minutes away from Poeltl, you can see a couple of those go to Orlando Robinson, a couple of them to Chris Boucher. Any additional minutes you give to Chris Boucher, considering how good of a fantasy producer he is and how easy this matchup is on paper, he's going to look really good. So I like Chris Boucher quite a bit for tonight.
Yeah, he hasn't played since February 26th. We all know there are times where I have been correct about Chris Boucher, puts up 42 against Phoenix. There are times that I've been wrong about Chris Boucher, DNPCD, but let it be known, Chris Boucher is in play. Look at the Raptors. Look at the Toronto Raptors. We've got Battle and Lawson and Roden. This sounds like an early 2000s North Carolina Tar Heels basketball team. This does not sound like an NBA 2025 Toronto Raptors basketball team. It is asinine what we are looking at. The fact that Jakob Poeltl is actually playing in this game is shocking because he's actually good at basketball. These other goobers are not. What are we actually doing here other than tanking? What are we doing?
Yeah, everybody's out for the team. And for you asking, what are they doing other than tanking? That's it. They're just tanking. They're not doing anything else. If they accidentally get into a competitive game, they take everybody with a pulse off the court. You got Jamal Sheed in the game the other day, just hilarious, where should have been called for a violation because he walked on the court before inbounding the pass. And then they just end up granting a timeout. Then he hits a game-winning shot, but ends up coming after the buzzer. And it was a game where it was a fairly competitive game against Washington, and they just took all of their starters off the court at the end of the game. So they are absolutely doing everything they can to not end up winning games. If you guys want to win, I'm going to tell you the easiest way you could win right now. Sign up for Portfolio EV. 7-day free trial for all new users. If you guys have not checked out these tools, they have been terrific for me in the month of March. Eric, I'm now at over $4,000 in profit. We are less than 2 weeks into the month, and most of my bets are $10. I'm just volume betting using the tools that we have. It is perfectly viable on limited accounts. It is great for building your bankroll. And with some of the uncertainty of NBA DFS down the tail stretch of the season, why not give yourself a little bit more of a sure thing? This is the equivalent of cash games in 2025. Use our betting tools, Portfolio EV, and start building your bankroll today. Use those funds to supplement your GPP play, and then hopefully get a big one playing NBA GPPs down the stretch of the season. Are you ready? Are you ready for what could only be called the most clever super chat that we've seen in quite some time?
I haven't seen it. Andre Drummond available to play.
Okay. So now whatever we said before about the
Bona guy.
center minutes for the 76ers. Like, I don't think we're going to see a ton out of Drummond. Like, I don't think he goes out and plays 30 minutes or anything like that. But we don't have to worry about who plays the backup center minutes anymore. It's going to be Drummond splitting time here with Bona, and there's nobody else really to worry too much about here. So ownership, yeah, that's also updated as well. So we got projections updated. We have ownership updated. We have Drummond in for 23 minutes, Bona for 25. Totally reasonable to me. Those are your 48 minutes for the Philadelphia 76ers at the center position. A fake 3v. Are you ready for a fake 3v3 question?
Oh, this is absurd. Yes.
All right. On one side, this is from Shauno53. On one side, he is Hardened Man Dick. On the other side, it is Love Gay Bona. Do you have a preferred side of the fake 3v3? Me either. Shout out to Shauno. Thank you very much for the super chat. The return of Chris Williams, our friend from Apple. Chris, who I know because he pops up in playback from time to time. I know he was sick for a little bit. He's also been busy with work. But Chris Williams popping back up saying, just giving a shout out. Yes, I am alive. Good to hear. Good to hear. Was really sick for a bit and then took a mini break from DFS and concentrated mainly on college basketball bets. He also gifted out 10 YouTube memberships. So Chris, thank you very much for supporting the channel, and always good to see you around. Don't even if you're not playing the late night NBA slates, you could always pop into playback and say hi to us. We always like hearing from you and all that. So Chris, happy to see that you are feeling better because he was sick for like a couple of weeks. I don't know what the exact time frame was, but it was a while that he was not feeling all that great. I want to look at the Dallas Mavericks here, Eric, and look at what our updated projections are for them. And you'll see here that we've got a handful of guys that are projecting pretty well as of right now. Now that we've got PJ Washington out of the mix, if we sort by the highest projected players by fantasy points, Najee Marshall in for 36. He's been priced all the way up to 7,500. That's a pretty steep price tag for Najee Marshall. I'm going to struggle to get all the way up to him at that kind of salary. Klay Thompson, he is the next highest projected player on the team at 34 fantasy points. And we got Spencer Dinwiddie, our guy from the other night, 27.22 fantasy points. Max Christie in for just under 27 fantasy points, 26.5 for Kessler Edwards. Brandon Williams we have in for 26.3 right now. Dante Exum for 24.2. Then you got Dwight Powell and Caleb Martin both on limited minutes. What do you make of our initial projections here on the Dallas Mavericks while we still wait for news on Dante Exum and then the starting lineup as well?
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to is I think everything looks appropriate. It is not the team that it was a couple of games ago. Everybody's over 4K. Like everybody who's in play, like Caleb Martin and Dwight Powell are on those minutes limits. They're not in play. And then everybody else is over 4K and more appropriately priced for the situation. And we're waiting on a piece of news in Dante Exum, and we're waiting on a starting lineup. Is Brandon Williams in it? So things can change, and Brandon Williams could look way better. Oh, good. There you go. Dante Exum available to play. It's incredible how this keeps happening with Dallas on this show.
Yeah, we talk about them and say that there's some sort of uncertainty or waiting on a piece of news, and they just say, here's what it is that you're looking for. They just listen to us, and they let us know.
It's very nice to know. So they're not going to be a very appealing team on this slate unless Brandon Williams is starting, in which case I can get into a little bit of trouble with that. I think you can take shots on Klay Thompson. You can take shots on Max Christie even. I think is probably my next favorite. I probably don't get remotely close to any Najee Marshall or Kessler Edwards on this slate. It's a pretty unappealing team relative to the last few slates now.
Yeah, relative to the other slates, they're not appealing. I am going to like Kessler Edwards, though. If you just look at who's available in the front court for this team, like who could play center minutes? Kessler Edwards and then Dwight Powell, who's limited. We've got Kessler Edwards in for 32 minutes. He's a relatively decent fantasy producer. 32 minutes out of Kessler Edwards at a $4,300 price tag. He is somebody who's going to be in my lineups. He's probably the player I'll get the most of from Dallas.
I do think this, Greg. I do think against San Antonio, when there's no Zach Collins there's Charles Bassey who's out, Victor Wembanyama obviously out. Behind Biyombo, you have Sohan and Mamukashvili. Like, you're going to get some small ball, I think, in this game from Najee Marshall at the 5. I'm not a huge fan. I thought about that a lot because I was like, maybe Kessler Edwards ends up being the guy. And the more I just kind of like play it out with San Antonio on the other side, if Jeremy Sohan's in, pretty sure he's playing your backup 5 and playing the majority of the minutes at the 5. you can kind of do whatever you want with him, with Najee Marshall, Kessler Edwards, however you want to handle that situation. Doesn't have to just be a Dwight Powell out there. And then Mamukashvili, he kind of just sits out in the corner, just camping out every single possession I watch him play for the Spurs. But I suppose he's kind of known as a center, not necessarily very good at it. So I look at Dallas. Yeah, I think if you were to fall into a couple of lineups, I'm not going to poo-poo it because there's a lot of ways where Exum's limited. Brandon Williams is limited. Like we could still get a pretty thin rotation for Dallas somehow, some way. But when you compare it to the value we have from Toronto, it just pales in comparison. So yeah, I don't completely hate the idea, but wanted to at least address the matchup concerns I have.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he's like my favorite play on the slate or anything like that. He's going to be, I could say with near certainty that he is going to be in double-digit percentage of my lineups. I'm very, very certain of that.
Interesting.
And I'm running updates right now, so my lineups still need to be updated through the Sims for the latest news on Dallas and all the other players who have been ruled out at this point. But I really do think it's a team that I'm going to be having a pretty good amount of exposure to. Now, Eric, we do have a lot of value on the slate. That is going to be the case probably for just about every slate going forward. And when we have a lot of value, something that's always an important talking point is how are we filling the salary? Who do we want to be spending up for on the slate when you consider that we have really a ton of cheap guys to be going to? And then if you look at the pay-up options, at least on DraftKings, the FanDuel slate, it's going to be giving us a little bit more options on the high end. But for DK, we've got Jason Tatum to pay up for. We've got SGA to pay up for. We've got Trae Young to pay up for. We've got James Harden to pay up for. There aren't that many great spend-up options. It kind of creates a little bit of a tricky situation where infinite value, not a lot of spend-ups. So who are you prioritizing filling your salary out with?
Yeah, SGA and Tatum. Those are really the two. I mean, they're at the tippy top. We can spend up to the tippy top. They're the two highest projected. They're in the same game environment. And this is kind of like a playoff look ahead, a potential NBA Finals look ahead, where you're just getting two awesome teams that don't play that many competitive spots on a day in, day out basis that are going to be in a projected competitive spot. And 11-4 is no bargain on SGA, but you have Jalen Williams out, so at least there's that. And Jason Tatum, 10-7, it's no bargain, but at least you're getting Porzingis out. They're the two highest projected players. I think if you just made me pick, even without looking at the ownership here, just kind of like what I know about slates with value, I'd want to get to the top raw projected point players, and that's SGA and Jason Tatum. And then you take into account that neither of them have like asinine ownership, 30% for Tatum, just fine. 25% for SGA, just fine. I absolutely love them relative to a 20% Harden, a 20% Trae Young, a 20% Alperen Şengün. I'll just go all the way to the top, no doubt about it.
All right. Yeah, so the guys in playback are saying that my mic turned off again. I don't know why. It is showing you as muted for me over on playback. So I asked them if they could hear you. I don't know what's going on. I'm doing my best here, but the platform over there.
Have you tried using a different mic? Like use the different mic over there. So like use your speaker on your notebook and then not use the same mic. I've done that a couple times. No.
Tried all of the above. Tried all the above.
This organization will not tolerate failure.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully it's not an issue on the post-lock show, but out of my hands right now. So yeah, once again, if we look at the top pay-up options, it's tricky. There's only two players on the entire slate who are projected for north of 50 fantasy points. It's SGA and Tatum, the two guys there who Eric was signaling, not exactly singling out because there's two of them, coupling out.
Coupling out. Yeah. No, it sounds like, it's beautiful. California.
But either way, I mean, SGA at 56 fantasy points, Jason Tatum at 52 fantasy points. At their salaries, it's not usually guys that we'd be jamming in, but at a certain point, the raw fantasy points are going to matter more than anything else. So I'm going to agree with Eric to his point, which is we've got all this value on the slate. And honestly, it's not even going to matter. Like a lot of times people say, oh, this guy's 10,700, 11,400. You need to get 60 or 70 fantasy points out of them. There's enough value. You just need them to be the highest scorers. And I think those are rightfully the two guys projected to score the most fantasy points tonight.
Yep.
See if there was any other super chats that came in. And yes, We've got one from Nicholas. Says, what about a pre-news nuke of the night? Would be fun to give one off the bat, and then as news comes in, it changes. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's tough about that is I don't want to go ahead and just tell people to play somebody who I am then not going to like in 20 minutes. But with that said, we've got a lot of the pertinent news as of right now. Like, I don't know, like what are we waiting on that you think is going to come out pre-lock that could change our opinions on players?
Not a whole hell of a lot.
You know what that means?
Hit it.
All right, Eric, there you have it. The animation is run, which means it is our time to shine. Eric, 7-game slate, $5 GPP today. So, being a little bit more contrarian could certainly pay dividends. There's like 1 billion people in the big contest over on DraftKings, FanDuel, 9-game slate, but still you got big GPPs over there. Not quite as big as what we've got on DraftKings, but still sizable ones over there. Who are you going with for your nuke of the night?
I've gone back and forth on whether or not this is actually like somebody that I can verifiably like put my stamp of approval on. And I think I can. We have a $5,600 Colin Sexton, and we haven't talked about Utah. Utah got slapped on the wrist today because they are bad kids. We knew what they were doing. They were just finagling around the injury report, a little loosey-goosey. Look at this. But their whole intention was to limit the minutes of main guys, to keep Lauri Markkanen from getting hurt between now and the end of the year. There were ties to Golden State, yada, yada. I don't really think that that was ever going to be something that was in play. Josh talked about that routinely, about how it didn't work for Lauri Markkanen to get moved by the Jazz. But Colin Sexton at 5,600 with no Keontae George behind it, coming off of getting slapped on the wrist, played 33 minutes against Boston. What was that, 2 nights ago it was, in Boston? I think this is just an unbelievably good game environment that I want to tap into. We've seen 240 plus totals in like every Memphis game all season long. You get this breakneck speed with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane on the other side. You get a Utah team that isn't exactly trying to win games, but hey, go and get yours in a spot like this. Colin Sexton, tons of potential assists here. Should mute some of what Collier's been doing there. And yes, Clarkson is available as well, but we're talking 5,600 for Colin Sexton. That is a pretty cheap tag. He's very contrarian because of all these cheapies we have on the Toronto side. Definitely want to leak him into 20+% of my lineups. My nuke of the night, Colin Sexton.
We've got Colin Sexton in for 28 minutes and 31 fantasy points. He was projecting fairly decently for us here at that that $5,600 price tag. For myself, now that I've got Sims updated, I'm going through everything. Brandon Williams only projected for 7% ownership. I know we've got no clue what's going to happen with his minutes and the hamstring and whatnot. I want to take shots on him on GPPs, at least heading into this slate before we get more information. This team is so thin. And on top of being thin, like we already said, Caleb Martin and Dwight Powell, we know are playing limited minutes. If we hear that Brandon Williams is playing today, isn't limited, maybe even he's starting, he is woefully underowned at 7%. Also, it's crazy his price tag hasn't gone up considering how well he was playing when he actually was healthy. So I really like taking shots on Brandon Williams. I just updated my lineups, Eric. I got to him in 30% of lineups at 7% ownership.
That's a spicy meatball. That's a lot of Brandon Williams, and I totally get it. I think you have at least enough other Dallas pieces in your lineup specifically, not that are popping up organically here at the moment, but I mean, this slate is going really, really quick. We're going to have, 3 games locking right out the gate here in 28 minutes. Then we're going to have the other 4 lock right after it 30 minutes later. But there's a lot that can happen between now and lock. And then I'm hoping that news comes out after, because I'm with you, where I think Brandon Williams is definitely the guy that's the most intriguing from a tournament perspective. Now, that being said, if we find out Brandon Williams isn't starting, I'm also going to want to try to find my way onto more Klay Thompson, Spencer Dinwiddie, try to get a little bit of them just because there is DNP CD risk with Brandon Williams there in that event. I don't think it's likely. I think he's more than likely going to play now that he's available. But just saying, there's a lot of uncertainty that exists with Dallas and Philly with the minutes for all of these guys, and taking shots on the right ones definitely going to behoove you with tournaments going forward.
Yeah, but we're struggling with some of our words here. Me trying to figure out what do you say about singled out, but about multiple people, and then you trying to figure out how to behoove people properly, which that sounded more sexual than it really meant to come across.
Oh yeah.
Hey, we've got some more NBA to go over here. No more super chats. We're all caught up on that. Once again, if you guys haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to dive into Discord right now. And if you guys do want to get access to our Discord channel, here's how you do it. Sign up for any package that we have here at Stokastic.com. You can either do it straight up by just subscribing to a package down below in the YouTube description box, or take advantage of our link join offer. For each one of our partners, you guys sign up for 1 free month of Core Sims access. So if you want to sign up at Caesars, BetMGM, 2 months of core access, and it could be whatever sports you want. You want them both to be NBA, cool. You want them both to be PGA, that's cool. You want 1 PGA free month, 1 NBA free month, that's cool as well. And you could sign up for as many free months as you want through these different partners we have on screen. By the way, this also applies to Portfolio EV. So it doesn't have to be a free month of Stokastic. It could also be a free month of Portfolio EV. Take advantage of that offer. We don't know how long it's going to be around for. Let's get into that Discord now, Eric. By the way, Zach Edey officially rolled in. No real surprises there. He was upgraded to probable earlier. Let's see what we have for questions. First one here from Steven Leibowitz. Steven wants to know, who is the fluke of the night? The guy who we did not see coming that could break the slate. Well, if I knew that, I would see him coming.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't even answer that, because it's like, if I saw them, like if I were trying to say who it is that's going to be under the cover for it, it's like, that's like just basically us listing off our favorite low owned plays that we do segment by segment later on in the show. Like I can't even like think of what that would be. I will say, somebody that I'm considering that could go completely nuts that I don't think anybody's even talking about, Mark Williams, 7,400. Like, I don't know, just throwing it out there. Center, we're going to get a lot of different center plays to rotate through. Okongwu, him. Obviously, I might like Jakob Poeltl a little bit more than Greg, but yeah, if we saw him coming, we would just tell you.
Yeah. Boy, people are going to run with that one. I can tell you that much. Yeah, I mean, I'll stick with Brandon Williams because there's so many different ways the minutes could end up going there. So I think there's a lot of people who, if Brandon Williams plays 28 minutes and crushes a slate, people are like, oh, I thought he was going to be limited or something like that.
Aaron Wiggins officially starting for OKC.
Okay. Yeah, not massively surprising. Keep in mind, OKC, no Jalen Williams. He is going to be out for an indefinite amount of time because of a hip injury. Now, indefinite doesn't mean forever. It just means without a timetable. He could be back in a couple of days, could be a couple of weeks. We don't know. But what is surprising about the starting lineup is, so I thought there was a pretty good chance that Wiggins was going to be starting in place of Jalen Williams. I did not think this meant that we would see Hartenstein coming off the bench, because we have SGA, Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Aaron Wiggins, Chet Holmgren, OKC going small to match up against the Boston Celtics. Kind of interesting that means that we could end up seeing in a potential finals matchup, Hartenstein maybe barely playing in the NBA finals. I know there's other starting lineup news as well. But Eric, this OKC starting lineup, is this going to really change the slate for you in any kind of way?
No, but read the Raptors one now, because what in the bloody fuck?
Yeah. So the Raptors one, this is also kind of related to OKC. So the OKC starting lineup, where they don't have Hartenstein and Hartenstein's coming off the bench. By the way, if you bet unders on Hartenstein early in the day, those are looking great right now. But the reason that some of these players like Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Aaron Wiggins aren't going to look all that great for OKC, even with Jalen Williams out, is because of the amount of cheap guys that we have to go to, particularly from a team like the, by the way, relatively normal 70, as normal as the 76ers starting lineup could possibly be.
No,
but
it's not.
Raptors, going with Sheed, Roden, Battle, Castleton, and Jakob Poeltl. Is this a championship winning starting five?
No, It's not, but also, no, that's not the lineup I was expecting to get. We got freaking what's his face starting. Like, I mean, that's not what I expected. We got Butler starting instead of Lonnie Walker.
But no, but that's because of we've got Oubre back.
We had Lonnie Walker starting the whole day. He's not starting, right? We still had him starting over. So I'm saying Butler was not who we had expected to start. There's no way.
Let's see.
I didn't expect Butler to start.
I didn't have any Lonnie Walker exposure.
Lonnie Walker is who we had in starting at shooting guard. Lonnie Walker is one of our highest optimal percentage guys, north of 25%. I'm just cross-referencing boom bust, which I always copy and paste into a separate sheet and kind of work through. But Lonnie Walker, I definitely expected to start. And now we're getting a better fantasy producer for 100 more in Butler. I'm going to want to play Butler.
Yeah, so this is going to be updated. We had Lonnie Walker in for 28 fantasy points. All right, I had considerably lower minutes on Lonnie Walker. So I had Lonnie Walker in 0% of lineups.
Oh,
he's going to remain in no lineups in no lineups for me. As far as Jared Butler goes, Butler at $4,400 point guard, shooting guard eligibility. In 19 minutes, we had him project for 23 fantasy points. He's probably now going to be projected for like 27 minutes or something like that, which is going to bring him up to over 30 fantasy points. Yeah, Jared Butler is a really, really good looking value option.
Looks really good. That's what I was getting at. I was like, what are you talking about? That is not the lineup that I expected. So I don't think we had said Jared Butler's name because I just assumed that they were going to start Lonnie Walker at the 2 next to Kelly Oubre. Just kidding. Playing another ball handler. Butler is going to be criminally underowned, I think. So let's party.
Yeah. And the Raptors, like, I don't really know exactly what we should have expected out of the Raptors starting lineup. It is funny when people are like, oh, AJ Lawson isn't starting. It's like, yeah, should he have started? Who the hell knows? These guys are all interchangeable. So we're going to have projections.
You didn't have the right guy. Yeah. All I know is Castleton. Colin Castleton is starting at the 4. He is the tallest, gangliest, weird dude out there playing. I don't know how many Toronto games you've watched recently. Probably a number of them because
a lot of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was going to say probably more than I was anticipating right from the get-go. But having Colin Castleton start next to him is kind of strange. He's 3,500. He's got pretty secure minutes. I mean, he's in play.
Yeah, so we've got Castleton is 3,500. We've got Roden is 3,300. Battle's 3,200. Jamal Shed is 4,400. We got Jakob Poeltl at 6K. Just wondering, does this change how you feel about Jakob Poeltl in any kind of way?
I mean, it doesn't help to have like another center starting next to him because that's the way I think of Colin Castleton. Did Colin Castleton play any center? Because he was with Memphis last year, was it? Can't remember.
So
I know
in
he
terms
played
of
at
fantasy
Florida in
points per
college.
minute, and keep in mind, this is just what we have for fantasy points per minute. We're going to have some of the actual minutes change for the starting lineup in a projections update. But as far as fantasy points per minute, here's where we have these guys project, because this is going to remain more or less the same.
Yes.
Poeltl 1.26, Boucher 1.16, Orlando Robinson 1.02, Jamal Shed at 0.98. Then you got AJ Lawson 0.88, Garrett Temple at 0.87, who we've barely projected to play, one of your guys way back in the day. Then we've got Jemison Battle at 0.83, Castleton 0.82, and then Roden at 0.79. Castleton could come down a little bit because he's, I don't know, like it's not like these starting guys are higher usage than the bench guys like would normally be in these kind of scenarios. So that probably stays more or less exactly the same. I wonder if they just don't play anybody other than like Shed more than 30 minutes. And it's just a really, really spread out rotation.
Kind of what I'm thinking too. I mean, you still need to take shots on them because of how cheap they are. So it's not like you're trimming them to some egregious amount, but like, I do think the most interesting part of this entire thing is what we're going to do or what's going to happen with AJ Lawson in terms of his ownership in this update. Like that's going to be a big thing for me because what you're saying is exactly it. If they spread it more around, it doesn't necessarily matter that Lawson's coming off the bench. I mean, it's just, it's just spot where you're going to take lots of shots on these guys. We're moving around deck chairs is what we're doing. We're just moving around deck chairs with Toronto, and it's like, oh, these guys are starting now. They're the preferred value options, but we still have AJ Lawson playing 32, 33 minutes against Washington the last 2 games. Is he going to put up 53.5 off the bench? Probably not again, but at 4K, I'm very curious to see where his ownership comes down to as a result of him not starting. And then Castleton, just because you're adding another starter who's at center only, I can't imagine that I'm going to get to him, but it definitely hurts as far as like Jakob Poeltl there because, can trim a little bit more than what you were kind of hoping to get as the other starter out there. Like it's just another rebounder. And like, you got to hope Jakob Poeltl puts up double-digit rebounds. And I think having Castleton out there as opposed to a 2 or a 3 is definitely going to hurt that profile.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this too is these guys are so cheap, they don't even have to play big minutes. Like some of these guys are still going to project fairly well. And, that update's probably coming in like 2 or 3 minutes or something like that. And then we'll have that updated here on screen for the Toronto Raptors. But even with nobody expected to be playing massive minutes, like we only had 2 guys project for north of 30 minutes. It was Shed and AJ Lawson. Now it's probably only going to be Shed. These guys are still going to be a handful of ones who are projecting fairly well on the slate. Mike Will is asking us, who are the 2 Raptors players to play for single entry on both sites? I'm going to say Shed is one. Who are your 2 favorite Raptors? Like I feel pretty good about Shed, but who else?
It's got to be Roden now. Just positionality. I mean, I don't love it. He sucks. I'll actually I'll go with Jamison Battle still. He'll be number 2. Shed and Battle. I'll take the chalk.
Yep. I don't have any issue with that. By the way, projections just updated. So let's see what we have for the updated player projections now. We have now, all right, so we did go with 33 minutes for Shed, 32 for Roden. As far as points per dollar value, Battle in for 25 fantasy points at $3,200. Roden in for 25.5 fantasy points at $3,300. Shed in for 32.5 fantasy points. There's no way he's ever going to be projected for 30 fantasy points regularly in his career outside of the next month. We'll never hear from him again. He'll be very important the next month, and then we'll never hear from him ever again. Yeah. Chris Boucher, 22 fantasy points at $3,200. We've got Castleton in now for 23 fantasy points at $3,500. Once again, not projecting massive minutes. 28 for Castleton. Lawson off the bench in 29 minutes projects for 25.93 fantasy points. Poeltl we sell in for 27 minutes and 33.7 fantasy points. Nothing here is massively surprising to me. I think this is all pretty reasonable.
All pretty darn reasonable. I would agree with that as well. I'm again just trying to make sure I have everything in its right place right now. All right, I fixed that. I want to ask you about Plumlee as well, because I mean he's obviously going to be a center as far as the cheapies go. And when we're looking at this Toronto value, we do have Mason Plumlee coming up later. I think he definitely constitutes value. We don't have Russell Westbrook on the DK slate, so we don't have to think about that one so much. And then Brandon Williams, who's somebody that I know you said you were a little bit higher on there. If he's starting, I'm going to try to get to a little bit more. But like, how does Mason Plumlee look relative to Toronto for you?
So he's definitely a good option, but to me, not quite as good as the Raptors value. I had Mason Plumlee in, let's see, 33% of lineups in my last run. So like a significant chunk, but not somebody who's a lock sort of guy. Whereas some of these Raptors guys, I assume when I upped it, will be in close to half of my lineups. And then it'll be Plumlee. Once again, still a significant portion of my lineups. But your question was relative to the Raptors guys. I like the Raptors guys more than Plumlee. Plumlee still looks really solid, though.
Yeah, he looks really solid. He's 3,400. I thought I was going to end up playing an absolute eternal amount of him when I was working through the slate this morning and doing my betting thread. Ended up on some bets. I have a double-double Mason Plumlee, plus 480 on FanDuel, dropped to, inside of plus 450 now. Got some good, I think it's going to be some decent rebounding numbers on him as well. Some 8.5, 9.5, some ladders. But overall, I thought I'd get to just an eternal amount of him. But as news keeps rolling out, and then we do have Brandon Williams in, and we have some other things that just have a Butler. We haven't even talked about Butler. I love Butler on today's slate. Where did his ownership come in on our update?
Yeah,
nobody's
so
playing
I
him.
don't know. The ownership's probably updated by now. Let's see. Yeah, it is. All right, so I'll read off the most
Okay.
rostered players on both FanDuel and DraftKings, starting with FanDuel. We now have Jamal Shed in for 71% ownership, Battle in for 41%, Roden in for 39% over on FanDuel, Okongwu 36% owned, then just over 30% owned Najee Marshall, Alperen Şengün, and Josh Hart. No other player on FanDuel is more than 30% owned. Over on DraftKings, for the chalk, we have Shed, also super popular, 67% owned. Battle, 55% owned. And then the players just over 30% owned. Roden, Miles Bridges, as well as, wow, Najee Marshall has gotten to be very, very popular over on DraftKings. So maybe it's just a positionality thing. I had some of them before, but not a ton. Maybe he's just going to get forced into more lineups for me when I do the next update. And then just short of 30% ownership, Jason Tatum, the aforementioned Mason Plumlee, and Onyeka Okongwu. Then Chris Boucher coming in at 26.24% ownership, Eric.
Okay. We know I'm going to be fucking over that. So we know Eric's going to be over on Chris Boucher. You best believe that if Chris Boucher puts up 50, I'm going to be happy as opposed to sad. That is for sure.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be. I mean, I'll know when I update lineups here. If he's not somebody who I want to be taking like some kind of massive stand on. I'm cool with him being in lineups. I don't want my entire night to be hinging on whatever the hell Boucher's minutes are. Like I would rather be optimally for me. I want to be even with the field on Boucher, somewhere around 25% owned. If he has a good game, that's fine with me. If he's a terrible game, that's also fine with me. You cannot hurt me if I do that, Chris Boucher. You can hurt Eric all you want. You've done it many times. You'll do it. Yeah, you've done it before. You'll do it again. But Chris Boucher, I'll just align myself with the field on him.
There's 9 guys, and one of them is Garrett Temple. Like, they have 8 guys. Like, there's 8 guys on Toronto, basically, today. Like, that's the way to look at it.
Yep.
I remember a couple of those Garrett Temple slates. Those were beautiful. Those were beautiful slates.
Let's see what else we have for questions. I think I saw a super chat that came through. And yes, a couple of them. First, Sam Van Dam, Steven Adams, or Mason Plumlee? Mason Plumlee.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely Mason Plumlee by a lot.
Then Jeff Williams, what does this do to Boucher? Nothing. Like, there was never a scenario where Eric or I thought he was going to start.
Correct.
It's the same exact scenario. He is massively volatile. He's a terrific fantasy producer. He could play anywhere from 0 to 28 minutes today, and that's not an exaggeration.
Honestly, this is probably the best use of the variance button that we've had so far. Like, do you want to talk through the people how to utilize the variance button over in the Sims tool? Because I think this is like the perfect explainer, because I've had a couple of DMs of people asking me about the variance button. I'd rather just kind of hear it from you, because again, it's something that I know how it was designed. I know what it was designed for and the utility, and I've kind of been utilizing it a little bit here and there and testing it out. But I think that this is a great opportunity for people to learn about the variance button specifically that is now in the Sims tool.
Yeah. So if you want to add a little bit more randomness to the outcomes of players, then when you're on the Sims page, you could actually change the variance number. The default is going to be 1. You can put it at 1.1, 1.2. The higher number is going to introduce more variance. So on your Sims run, the player's projected fantasy score, it will be, just more all over the place. If you have higher variance, if you move the number to a lower variance, you can move it as low as 0, where the player's fantasy point projection just never changes, and it's the same exact thing every single time. That's actually useful in the late swap tool when games have already finished and you're doing late swaps. You just lock in a player's set fantasy points at that point in time. So that's the best way to go about using it. And somebody in Discord actually asked us if there's any teams that we'd want to change the variance for. Are the Raptors one that you're considering doing that with?
Yeah, I was looking at doing it with the entire team to some extent, and that's a really good use of it there. I mean, I can kind of just filter out the team and do it a little bit more granularly, but I feel pretty comfortable in saying that this is the best use of the variance button that we've had so far.
I think there's been a lot of good uses of it down the stretch of the season here with some of the odd slates we've had. But your point is definitely taken in that regard. Let's see what else we have. I think there was a bunch of questions came into Discord, so let's get through as many of these as we possibly can. M Grizzly wants to know, is there anybody that we're boosting for tonight? Brandon Williams for me.
Najee Marshall for me.
Okay. Oh, so you're gonna be paying up for Najee Marshall?
Yeah, the more I work through it, the more I just kind of think that there's a lot of 5. Najee Marshall at the 5 waiting. Dallas is 33-33. They're not going to try to tank. There's no tanking that they can really do. They're going to get Anthony Davis back hopefully soon. Try to make a run at play-in/playoffs, but overall, Dallas, they don't have any reason to go out and lose games. They need to try to win. So Najee Marshall, I think, gives them the best chance at the 5. And if Jeremy Sohan ends up in, which I think is still news we're waiting on, right?
Yes, he is still questionable. There's still a bunch of guys questionable that Josh and I will have to cover in the playback show when this show ends in 7 minutes.
Yeah, so he's definitely somebody that I'm kind of considering giving a little boost to.
Okay. Yeah, I did notice that our projection came up on him from earlier, which is like when I was first looking at Dallas, I just didn't think I was going to be getting to Najee Marshall at $7,500. But now it does appear that, at least to some extent, I think I'm going to be getting to him. I don't know how heavy, but he is one of the more popular players on the slate for tonight.
Yeah.
The next question we have here is from Coach DFS. Who are our overall favorite GPP options for tonight, Eric?
Do we want to go by position or just like guys that I know I'm higher on looking at right from the get-go?
You can answer it however you want.
All right. I definitely have more than 22% SGA. I definitely have more than 30% Jason Tatum. We'll start there. In the mid-range / upper range that I'm looking at here, one guy that I really think is interesting, I mean, obviously your boy Kessler Edwards on the cheap, but Najee Marshall, 7,500, just brought him up. His projection did come up, so now I don't even have to boost him here in this next run. I'm going to do one more run as we get out of here. Onyeka Okongwu, love him as well. He's pretty popular. And then as far as cheapies go, everybody wearing a Toronto jersey. Butler as well, who's not pulling a ton of ownership, or he wasn't a second ago. Yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates my favorite plays. Guys that I think are way off the board, like I think Zach Edey at 4,800 can end up walking into more minutes and just put up 18 and 15 in like 2 seconds. Klay Thompson is going to be a little bit underowned because nobody likes to play a 6,400 Klay Thompson. He's the reason that they're in this mess. Apparently the way that the salary works for him, they can't really go out and get anybody. So that's why they're playing so thin as Klay Thompson himself. So he's going to be playing major minutes. 6,400 for him, I think, is going to be single digit owned. I'm pretty happy with being over on that too.
Cream wants to know, is Quentin Grimes in play? I know he's priced up a bit, but he seems to be able to cover it. I have no clue what the hell to think of his minutes. We hear the other day that his minutes are going to be monitored for the rest of the season, which it's always kind of ambiguous what that actually means. But part of the quote too is Nick Nurse said that he didn't want guys like Quentin Grimes, Yabusele, or Kelly Oubre to be playing close to 40 minutes down the stretch of the season. We see Quentin Grimes play limited minutes the day he says that. The next day, it's the tail end of a back-to-back. It's a game that the 76ers are looking to lose, and he plays 40 minutes. So I don't know exactly what to make of Quentin Grimes' playing time, but there's enough risk there, and there's so much value on the slate that he's not somebody I want to be prioritizing.
It's exactly the way that I look at it. I do have, I have 4% of him.
Yeah, if he's in a lineup or two, cool, but it'll be less than 10% of my lineups that I have with Quentin Grimes. Hey, I'm Drew. DK Cash Game Plays also said he signed up with a sportsbook from the promo. So we'll send the screenshots in tomorrow. Yeah, just follow the steps on the screen for anybody who signs up. It's really easy on that link join page. Outside of just signing up for any of the sponsors we have here, there's just 4 steps you have to follow that are on the page. Just adhere to those, and it'll be easy sailing to go and claim that free month there. As far as the guys that I think we absolutely should be playing in cash games, if we sort here by the highest owned players, boy, I can't believe how Chris Boucher's 40% owned now, Eric.
That's getting to like, I have to almost like completely flip my stance on territory. I mean, fudge, man.
I know he's 40% owned. I don't feel comfortable advocating for him as a cash game option, though.
No, I don't either. He's 3,200 though. I have 42% of him, so almost exactly with the field. I'd be okay holding hands with them at this point. If they want to get to more of that, I mean, we know what we're dealing with. It's fire. It's you're dealing with fire.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Shed, Battle, Rodin, Jason Tatum, SGA. Just really, really stars and scrubs. That is what I think is going to make the most sense for cash games today. A few super chats that just came in. Daniel Buffington, Harden and Marshall, or SGA and Clay. That for me is going to be
SGA Clay.
Oh, that's so close. It's so close.
Yeah, they're very close.
I'll say SGA and Clay. It's both good combinations, though. People hate to hear this answer, but the reality is a lot of the 2v2s that we get questions to, both of them are good combinations. You can't go wrong with either of them. That's how I feel about that particular one that you asked us, Dan. There's some questions we get for 2v2s where there are like pretty egregious players on either side. But yeah, that one's pretty reasonable. I'll go with the SGA side, though. Let's see what we have for our next question. It is a super chat from Del Toro. Just got here. Top FanDuel GPP plays, Eric.
I just got my lineups uploaded to DK, and I ran a sim in the background on FanDuel. What a nice guy. Let's see. FanDuel, Jamal Shed by a mile. Jared Roden still by a mile. Let's see. Jamison Battle by a mile. Power forward Kessler Edwards by a mile. And center Alperen Şengün by a mile.
All right. Sounds good. I just got my lineups updated as well. So thank you for covering that for me. Your towel wants to know last minute for a FanDuel GPP at $6,400. Can be a small forward or a power forward. Let's see. $6,400 on FanDuel, small forward or power forward. Let's see. That is going to be Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson. Easy actually. Slink the second, Pirtle and Bane, or Okongwu and Ja. Okongwu and Ja for me. Now let's just fire through as many of these Discord questions as we can. Madub T, top 5 value options for tonight's slate. All right, so the 5 value options that I got the most of, that is for me, Shed, Battle, Roden, Boucher. I line myself exact with the field on Boucher. That was how I went about and did it.
Yep.
And then Colin Castleton, the final one for me.
Oh, Colin Castleton, you got to.
I did.
Look at you.
I
Look
did.
at you.
JT Mack, favorite way to get different in the 2-2-2 Slam Jam contest today. I really like Castleton as a pivot off of. I cannot believe how popular Chris Boucher became.
Yeah, it's a lot of ownership. That's a lot of people who want to play Chris Boucher. That's for sure.
Einstein, who gets the biggest bump with Williams out? Probably SGA.
I got to 12% Castleton. I didn't even realize that till just now. Okay, cool.
And then we've got Pat Clay Tomstar. If you're going to boost one Maverick today, it would be Brandon Williams. Yes, it would be Brandon Williams for me. And then Sniffs wants to know, how do we feel about AJ Lawson? AJ Lawson, I didn't get to very much of AJ Lawson.
Let me see how much I ended up with in the end. 32%. So I got a lot more than you did.
All right. Yeah, I did not. I have just over 10%. And then finally, Ethan 7. Any other favorite spend up options for single entry other than SGA? Jason Tatum.
Tatum for sure.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Come join Josh and I over in Playback because we are still waiting on a bunch of news. A lot of stuff to potentially happen here. Players to get ruled out, weird starting lineups. So I'm dropping that Playback link into the chat. So come join us over there. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Come join us over on Playback. Click that link. Have a good night. Good luck.